All right, I believe we're live right now. I'm going to mute. Oh, 1 second.
It was over 40 yards. Yes, I'll bet you. Okay, it's a lot of milkshake. And now COVID's a handshake. How far was that thing? Was it a point after? That was just a 30-yarder. Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, I get 2 milkshakes. 2 milkshakes. You can't just do anything.
I'm sorry. Oh, sweet. Okay. Yes.
Okay, great. I think we're gonna leave the mic right there, so wherever we put it, if we're gonna put it up front of the board later on, let's not touch it. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
How does the video quality? Is the video okay?
Well, it's standard def, not high definition, so it's going to be hard for people at home to read.
We want to try to move the camera forward a little bit.
I don't want to touch anything, sir.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
You can see it by,
You okay?
yeah, I can see it on
Thank you.
Yes. I hit that slash.
my.
Found the slash.
Sometimes they hide it along the bottom and that whole mix of stuff.
Yeah.
They can be hard to find.
Yeah.
The traffic that turns off on the new street.
You're right, it's not. I'm like afraid to touch anything right now.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Yeah, it's not when you want it though.
You know the word bougie. Okay. Like that's how that works. No, but they usually when they do, it's a practice. I'm just trying to see you guys because they do this thing where they have happy hour where it's buy one get one free. Like they do get a drink, I get a drink, and it's a great drink, right? When the price is much.
Only got 40 minutes, no delay. Read delay. That's not just
about the 500.
You do? Well, every one of them. You had it last night.
Yeah. It's right under, mine is right under where it says title.
So, last night, like, all my stuff. And, I got this.
Are the numbers going up at all?
Yes.
Yeah, you're at 110 just a second ago.
Beautiful. And I'm gonna proceed. Everyone can we hear? Is anyone monitoring right now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It says that.
Everyone ready to get started?
The message is here.
Everyone ready?
Okay.
That would be myself. Community audience that we had the technical difficulties. I am so extremely sorry for the delay and having to drop the link and create a new link. Apparently the sound was working when we started the meeting, but unfortunately as we shifted and moved to the presentation, we lost sound and dropped that capability. So thank you so much for bearing with us. Again, sincerely apologize for that technical difficulty. I promise it was not a way to try to get you to not follow along. So we will proceed. As I began earlier, I just would like to take a moment and thank our school board of directors. They have a big decision in front of them this evening. What we have created here in a Brandywine Heights Area School District Health and Safety Plan is a culmination of the administration's work throughout the entire summer, a committee of teachers, board members, administrative staff that worked together and developed a special committee to think through all the safety protocols for a safe reopening of school. And all of that information, those countless hours, has all been combined into what we're going to be presenting tonight. It is a written document of multiple pages, but what this is a summary by department of what the health and safety plan is. So again, I'll begin, but I wanted to thank everyone for your patience, for your willingness to log back on into a new link, and for joining us this evening. We'll be going through these following areas. As I go through, again, we'll be talking about key areas of our health and safety plan by department. To begin, Pennsylvania Department of Education released guidelines this summer and said that all 500 school districts had to create a health and safety plan. And in development of a health and safety plan, had to develop 3 phases for the opening of school: a green phase, a yellow phase, and a red phase. In the development of that safety plan, they encouraged counties to work together. So the Berks County Intermediate Unit led that charge. They met with all the superintendents through the county. They met with the different county leadership and created a unified approach to the reopening of school. That unified approach back in June and the beginning of July, as we worked through this, was to open school in green phase with in-person instruction. The Brandywine Heights Area School District conducted a parent survey and also a staff survey. And during that parent survey, what we found was 90+% of our parents were in favor of returning to school. 34% during the survey indicated they wanted a hybrid plan, and 58% wanted an in-person plan. Some other interesting statistics suggested that 68% of our families have a child care option, as well as 66.5% would be willing to drive their children to school. So we'll be using that data metric, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. We will be sending out a survey to our families to ask if you would continue and would be willing to drive your child to school as we start the school process here. Taking that health and safety plan, taking the guidance from the county, the district developed its own committee. And as I mentioned earlier, that committee was developed of teachers. It was developed from administration representation, as well as school board representation. 47 individuals were involved in that process. It was a 5 subgroups that were created: an education planning subgroup, a transportation, a food service subgroup, a health considerations subgroup, an athletics and extracurricular subgroup, a cleaning and sanitizing, disinfecting, and ventilation. And we worked through all the various aspects of the health and safety plan. And just to give you an understanding of what was involved in that health and safety plan, the template, before we even put a letter on the template, was 11 pages to start. So very comprehensive. It took a lot of time and effort for us to go through that process, but in the end, it yielded a very good result that we can all be proud of. 22 meetings, you can see some of the statistics there. 22 meetings over the course of 500 hours were devoted to the committee work planning. And through all that process, again, we developed a health and safety plan with a unified approach to what education would look like in the Brandywine School District for green, yellow, and red phases. So as we look at some metrics of where we are currently, again, as we started the conversation, the Pennsylvania Department of Education released that back in June, early July, late June. The county kind of came together on this collective vision. Where we are right now, as of July 27th, is that Berks County had 5,044 cases. That has slightly increased over time. It is a population rate of an infection rate of 1.2% for the county. The zip codes of the Brandywine School District, for the most part, is 19562, 19539, 18011, and 19522. The interesting and challenging part with that is something, for instance, like 19522 is the Fleetwood zip code. So that encapsulates the town of Fleetwood and then also Rockland Township. So it gives us a general feel for our area, but not necessarily a unique Brandywine perspective. And really, there's no way to drill down at a school district level or even township level to find out these data points. The Pennsylvania Department of Health does release a weekly update on a COVID-19 early warning monitoring system. The two images there are from a snapshot from Friday. And the data point is suggesting that we had 193 cases in Berks County 7 days ago. And then on Friday, during that 1 week period, there was a decline we were down to 171. One of the metrics that the state has been using is the number of infected individuals per 100,000 residents. They were using that as a metric at the state level when we moved from the red to yellow phases for other counties. And they also continue to report that. This is the data for this past week. And you can see that we were at a 45.9 a week ago, 7 days ago. And most recently, we were at a 40.7. So the good news is that we're starting to see that decline. The bad news is, as you probably know, following some of the data trends, is that we were a lot lower. We were in the 20 to 25 range in July, and that has started to trend itself up a little bit into this 40 range. So again, right now, currently, we're at that 40.7 infection rate per 100,000. So the school district, as we developed this phasing plan for education, looked at how are we going to devise a plan to understand what phase we are operating in. And I think it's really important to make decisions based off of data. It's really important to have some data metrics to determine what phase we're operating in. The challenge is that we have been tasked as a school district, as 500 school district, to try to determine that on our own. We don't have that guidance from the state levels organizations to give us the case ratios. So the district decided to use the infection rate that we talked about here a minute ago, which is this, how many cases per 100,000. So what we are presenting this evening is a data metric that the school district will be using to decide which operating phase of education we'll be operating under. So if the cases would get to 50 cases per 100,000, that would mean we would be in the red phase. We would be looking to consider virtual education. If we had cases that were between less than 50 and up to 25, less than 25 cases, we would be operating in the yellow phase. And if we had less than 25 cases per the 100,000, then we would be operating in the green phase. Again, I think it's really important to make these decisions based off of metrics. I think this is key as part of a decision-making process. We can make decisions based off of gut, we can make decisions based off of feelings, but really we have to be able to have some kind of data stamp to be able to move forward with. So part of this process is also to look at the rate of positive test results. If you've listened to any of Secretary Levine's comments, she's been relying a little bit more heavily on the less than 5% for as a good data point. So we're going to be monitoring that as well. And then decisions for school will be made in a 2-week consecutive data. So it's not just going to be, well, we're looking at the data this week and all of a sudden we're in green. So we're going to move to online, we're going to move to regular learning. And now next week, all of a sudden we spiked and we're really high. Now we're going to go to a red phase or a yellow phase. We want to look at this as more of a trend line, and we also need to also be very concerned about what our exact community is looking like. So we need to be mindful of the decisions we make. So as we use this data as our general guide, if there's something that would happen within our community, let's just say it was within the school district even, and we'd have a spike in cases, and we're still, for some reason, still in the green as a county, but we had a spike of a bunch of cases in the school district, then we would want to trend and make a decision really quick on the school district lens to shift our education plan into a new mode of thinking. So this is our general guide for how we're going to be operating school. But again, there's some variables, some factors that we would want to take into consideration for the local decision if it would need be by the data points. So what I'd like to do is walk through what does education look like in these three plans. The education plan that is presented to this board this evening encapsulates these three plans for a green phase of education, a yellow phase, and a red phase. Again, we had to develop education plans based off of this color phasing. That is what was given to us by the Department of Education. So the green phase, that is what we have been talking about as the process for in-person learning. It would mean all our students would be coming back. If there would be an illness and students would have to be, and we'd have to exclude students, we would have virtual learning for those students. And that would be mirrored in a Google Classroom. So everything that's going to be happening in person will be put in a Google Classroom, and our families could follow along of a student that would be ill. They could follow along, parallel that instruction, and 2 weeks later, when they're able to return, could fairly seamlessly jump back in and pick up where the class left off. We also will have a full virtual option available for families that are not comfortable or for medical concerns would prefer that they attend a virtual learning environment and not an in-person learning environment. And that virtual option is available in any of our options we're discussing here, whether that's a green, a yellow, or a red phase. We'll talk about what that virtual environment looks like in a second, but I think it's really important to know that there is an option for families, if they're not comfortable, for them to be able to attend virtual environment. The yellow phase. So currently, as we look at that data point, we would be suggesting that we would be operating in a yellow phase. So yellow phase would mean that we would be in a blended learning environment, K-12. Half the students would attend Monday, Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, schools would be off for cleaning, and Thursday, Friday, the other half of students would be attending. We would have virtual lessons for those students that would be not attending. So we'll talk about this in a second, but there'll be virtual learning for all students and a point of contact for all our students throughout the process. And then kindergarten in particular is pulled out of this. Kindergarten would have a half-day AM session as well as a half-day PM session, and that would be 5 days a week, and we would be offering bus transportation for those students. And then red phase would be a full education, full virtual education, because at that point there's so many cases that as a county, as a community, it's not safe for our students to be coming into school. So a little bit more details on where we are with the green phase. Technology is not our friend this evening, apparently. So as we move into the green phase, just as we transition the slide here, again, green phase will be completely in person. Green phase will mean that we are going to be operating in a process where we have all our students coming in. Those students will be coming in with bus transportation or with parents offering bus transportation. We would be requiring that all masks be worn when we are in session. So whether that's the green phase or the yellow phase, we do have to be abiding by the masks. And we will be working on the 6-foot distancing. While that's not possible at all times, we will be trying to work through that process. So we'll talk about that in a second. We will be providing mask breaks throughout the day. We realize that for our staff and particularly our students, that's going to be challenging to be wearing a mask the entire time. It's going to be new for some of them. Some of them are very accustomed to wearing a mask. Others are not so much. So we want to be very cognizant of that. We're not going to develop strict schedules for when mask breaks are going to be, but we're going to let teachers take those opportunities to take breaks, walk in the hallway, spread our children out 6 feet apart, and have mask breaks. We're also going to allow teachers to be able to teach outside and be able to do some of their education outside on nice days. Again, a good opportunity to spread the children apart, or even use large group spaces like the auditorium, large group instruction area, gymnasium. again, opportunities to spread children apart, have some math breaks, but be able to still continue education. Desks will be separated to the greatest extent possible, so we removed all that non-essential furniture, and we've spaced out the desks in all the classrooms. Specialists, so things like library and art and music, those will rotate on a rotational basis. So typically what would happen is one day we would have art, the next day the children have library, the next day they would have a different special. We're going to do it more of a cohort. So they would have, for instance, library a bunch of days in a row, and then after we get through, let's say 2 weeks of library, they would go into a new special and have art for a bunch of days in a row. And the reason for that is twofold. We want to limit the exposure of the art teacher or the special teacher to all those different students and possible exposure to those and then transmitting that. And likewise, from the supplies perspective, it eliminates that touch point and the common touch points. We're trying to diffuse that possibility of sharing supplies. We are not looking to share classroom supplies. We will have supplies available for each child. We will be creating a student supply list, and that student supply list will be made available to families if you are able and willing to purchase items. That will help us, again, to just maintain each child having their own set of supplies. The Berks County Technical School, BCTC, is looking at 3 different scenarios. They're looking at either a total return of all students, a hybrid model, or a online model. If BCTC would be going to a hybrid model, the district's going to be recommending 2 things. One, the virtual BCTC days, when students would not be here, they would not be going to BCTC. They would be permitted to go to Brandywine Heights Area School District classes in the morning, and then they wouldn't be able to go to BCTC. So instead of sitting in school, we would allow them to go home for their afternoon classes when they would typically be going to BCTC. Likewise, BCTC students because if BCTC would go on a hybrid route or an online learning route, if a BCTC student would want to take online BHASD courses, they could absolutely do that as well, and that would eliminate them from even having to come into the school building. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible with our BCTC students. BCTC has a difficult challenge because they are operating a program for 16 other school districts throughout the county, and then dealing with their different 16 school district plans and how they're going to accommodate that. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can with our students so that they have variations and possibilities to still attend our classes, maybe go home in the afternoon, or if they wanted to attend online classes for all of Brandywine, and then they wouldn't even have to come in at all. So the Virtual Academy. We've been talking about the Virtual Academy and that there is an option for virtual learning. The Virtual Academy is something that has been around since 2011. It is a very well-developed program. So it's not something we just created because of this whole pandemic. This is a well-invested program. In fact, last year we had 24 online students, fully online students, and we had over 250 students in our school district that took some kind of partial or blended learning environment as well as in person. So this is a very well-invested program. It is an option that is available to all our families right now. So again, if the family's not comfortable with coming back either in person, fully green, or even a hybrid model, this is absolutely a viable option for you. There's curriculum options that are available, as you can see there through Edgenuity. We use a third-party curriculum provider. So that provides the curriculum platform for the online learning. And then there's a certified teacher assigned to the online learning platform. So through that certified teacher process, we would typically use a teacher from Edgenuity as a Pennsylvania certified teacher. What we're doing right now is trying to determine how many students would be interested in an online learning environment. And then what we're going to do, the best of our ability, is try to match a Brandywine student up with a Brandywine teacher for the online learning environment. We can't guarantee it 100%, but if we're able to do that matching up and there's enough students that are enrolled and we have teachers that have the certification to be able to do that, we will match them up together. Just as a point of comparison, I think this is really important. You often hear about online learning, and then you hear about cyber charter schools. And there's a lot of buzz and information about cyber charter schools, but as a point of contact of a cyber charter student, when you leave cyber charter, you are leaving the school district. You're no longer a Brandywine student. You go to another school essentially, and the Brandywine pays the tuition for you. So we are taking the taxpayer dollars basically and giving them to these cyber charter schools. The cost that is set by the state for Brandywine for this coming year is $16,400 for a student that would leave Brandywine and go directly to a cyber charter. Special ed student that would leave Brandywine is upwards of $36,000. So it is a massive amount of money that leaves the school district and goes to these cyber charter programs. There is a website. So if you go to our Brandywine School website and you go on the schools tab, at the very bottom of the schools tab is a virtual academy school, and you'll be able to get more information there. So the yellow phase of operation, I gave you a little glimpse of what that looked like earlier. It is similar to the green, where we would be doing education in person, but we also would have a blended model. So only half of our students would be coming in. You can see by this graph here that on a Monday, Tuesday, Group A would be coming in. And then Group B on a Monday, Tuesday would be working from home, working remotely. Wednesday, we would have off and no one would be coming in. That is our opportunity to do deep cleaning, make sure everything's cleaned before the next cohort of students slides in for Thursday, Friday. So Thursday, Friday, Group A that was in Monday, Tuesday would now be online doing remote learning, and Group B would be in person doing live teaching with the teacher. On this schedule, we would be operating on a half-day schedule. So when you think about a regular early dismissal through the course of the year, we would be using this early dismissal schedule. And the concept behind this is that the students would be coming in. They would have a little bit of a shorter day in terms of instructional hours, but we wouldn't be doing lunch. So that buys us back some instructional time. It would be about a 35 minutes session per course, per period. And then in the afternoon, it gives our teachers the opportunity to do live teaching sessions with those students that were online doing online learning that day. We really wanted to emphasize the point of making sure that all our students had a direct connection with our teachers every day. And so by doing live instruction in the morning for one group of students and then live online instruction with students in the afternoon, it ensures that our teachers are connecting with our students every day. And that was a very strong consideration as we developed this yellow phase. Continuing on with the yellow phase, as we go to the next slide here, kindergarten, as I mentioned earlier, will be operating on a half-day schedule. The idea here is that we were trying to cut the number of students in half that would be in person. So we would have half the students coming in the morning. That would be an 8:30 to 11:30 schedule. And then the other half would be coming in the afternoon, 12:30 to 3:15. We would be providing midday transportation. I know one of the challenges with kindergarten on a half-day schedule is how am I going to be able to get my child to and from school? We will be providing that transportation, dropping those morning kids off and then picking up the PM afternoon kids and bringing them to school and then taking them home, of course, at the end of the day. So that is our kindergarten schedule at this point. If we are in yellow phase, we're going to be following the BCIA schedule. So PIAA is the overarching state organization for athletics, and then the BCIAA is the Berks County Association. So we'll be following their schedule for sports. Extracurriculars would not be, so clubs, things that we would be typically doing after school would not be occurring because of the half-day schedule. It just isn't possible to run those in that scenario. If we move to the red phase, this phase indicates that we would be doing instruction completely remotely. This model is going to look a lot different than what we experienced in the spring. When you think back from the spring, Friday, March 13th, I think it was, we were told that school was closed. We had to develop a plan by Monday. We had a lot more time to think this through and develop a more thought out plan here. So this is going to look a lot different. We're planning on daily live instruction for students. We think it's an important process. Again, when we think back at that touch points, making sure our teachers are reaching out, connecting with our students. We are going to be doing live sessions. A set schedule will be developed and sent out to families if we would need to move into that live session. But essentially, it would be morning hours when students would be connecting in and following along for their session with their teacher. And then the afternoon would be an opportunity to do back work, to do some catch-up work, to do the homework, to connect with the teacher if they are having trouble, if they're having difficulties with the concept, and also for our intervention specialists, our special ed teachers to be able to connect with our special ed students and provide services at that point. As we transition from the educational plan, we're going to talk a little bit about safety protocols. I mentioned masks earlier in the green phase. Masks are required. They will be required by all our staff and all our students. We are an arm of the state, and as an arm of the state, we have to follow and abide by the governor order. And so we will be requiring the masks. I know there's a lot of controversy around the masks, but for the sake of ensuring the safety of our students and following the governor's order, essentially the laws for us, we will be following this process. The only way a student is able to get out of wearing a mask is if it's documented in a 504 plan, which is a medical plan, or a special needs plan, an IEP, an individual education plan. If this is a concern for you and you have medical documentation to support that, we'd ask that you contact the Pupil Services Office as they can help walk you through that process. If a student decides not to wear a mask or it becomes an issue, we're just viewing it as part of their attire. You can't walk into school without a shirt on. The mask is just part of your attire. So likewise, if a student wouldn't be wearing a mask, or a shirt, we'd give them a shirt. If they refuse to put the shirt on, we'd ask them to leave for the day. It's going to be the exact same protocol with masks. If they refuse to wear a mask, then we'll offer a mask for them, and we would expect that they would put that mask on to continue education for that time period. We talked about masks earlier and some mask breaks, but we will be trying to, there is some set examples of what the state has put out of when masks may be removed. And this is directly from the state. They can be removed when eating or drinking at least 6 feet apart. So our cafeterias during lunch period are spread out 6 feet apart. When they're seated at desks, they can be, and they're at least 6 feet apart at the desks, they can remove their masks. Or if they're engaged in activity when they're 6 feet apart. So again, that kind of goes to the concept of recess breaks, mask breaks, when we can break kids apart, having them 6 feet apart, they can take their masks off and have a break to not have to have that on. Social distancing, we are going to be spacing the classrooms out, which we already have done, as much as possible to get the 6 feet, but that will not be possible in all our classrooms, especially in our smaller classrooms. So in the green phase, if all the students are back in school, I think it's important for our community and our board members to know that we are working on spreading students out as much as possible, but we will not always be able to maintain 6 feet of distance. And in that case, masks must be worn at all times under 6 feet. And then we will create opportunities again to give students a break. And in very close circumstances, like a computer lab, we will be purchasing physical barriers to divide and desk dividers to divide the students apart. From the cleaning, sanitizing, disinfectant end of the plan, we will be doing nightly disinfectant and sanitizing of all areas. That is going to be in addition to the regular cleaning protocol. But we will be doing all common areas, all classrooms, all lavatories with a special disinfectant. It is an electrostatic disinfectant sprayer that will go through and ensure that we have killed off any possible germs that would be lingering. We will also be providing disinfectant wipes in the classrooms for the teachers to be able to wipe down the common areas before the next group of students would be rotating in. Hand sanitizer will be readily available throughout the buildings. That way our students can readily ensure that they are washing their hands. We also will be requiring students to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer when entering or leaving the classroom, and particularly before they go to lunch, before they go eat lunch. All our lavatories this summer have been converted, and we have automatic flushers in all the lavatories. So it, again, eliminates that common touch point of a toilet. And we've eliminated all our air blow dryers for hands and have installed paper towels, again, with the concept of trying to eliminate any touch points as well as blowing germs around. We also have put no-touch trash cans throughout the bathrooms. And while that sounds a little bit funny, sometimes when you have trash cans, they have the lids on them, or you have to put their foot on a lid to lift it up. So we've eliminated all those and have put no-touch trash cans throughout the facility. We will have limited use for common drinking fountains. So we are encouraging families to bring water bottles in. The concept behind that is we want to make sure that someone's not taking a water bottle of someone that might be infected, sticking it at a water fountain, and then potentially spreading that disease to someone else who comes up and then fills up their bottle next. We're adjusting our custodial staffing so that we have custodial support throughout the day. So our third shift custodians will be running. We're going to adjust some of the schedules there, and our third shift will be running more into the middle of the day. There'll be then a little bit of a break when our daytime custodian would be by themselves. And then our second shift custodian will be starting much earlier. And that second shift custodian will then be partnered up with our daytime custodian. So again, we have additional cleaning staff and custodial support throughout the day. High touch points will be cleaned regularly throughout the day, whether that's handrails or that's door handles. We'll also be propping our doors open as much as possible while still trying to ensure safety, again, to try to avoid people in the high touch point areas. We are going to eliminate the playground equipment, particularly in the intermediate and middle school. That's where any playground equipment is right now. Due to the construction at the elementary school, there is not physical playground equipment, so we don't have to worry about it as much at the elementary school currently, but at the intermediate school, that will be off limits for the time being. And then we've adjusted our HVAC systems to more regularly change our filtration system, as well as adjusted the outside airflow based off of the expert advice from our engineer side of the HVAC system that has helped us tweak those to, again, be able to ensure there's as much clean air coming in as possible, and then adjusting the filters to accommodate for that. In terms of monitoring our student and staff on the health side of the situation, we will be asking student and staff to conduct a self-monitoring wellness check every morning. So all staff will have a checklist, all our students will have a checklist, and we're asking families to go through that checklist, and if there's any signs or symptoms of a concern, we're asking that you not come into school that day to avoid any potential concern of transmitting the virus into school. If there would be an affected issue between a student or a staff, we are going to be requiring, following CDC guidelines, that someone's quarantined for 14 days or until they have to have a doctor's note to return. If a student staff member is exposed to someone that is in close contact, we're asked them also to quarantine for 14 days. Again, we're following CDC guidelines here of what to do if there is an infected person or an exposure. Close contact, as defined by CDC, is someone that is within 6 feet of a infected person, and I think the key piece is infected person there, for at least 15 minutes. So we'll talk about assigned seats later, but that's going to be an important part of our plan. And then finally, the last piece is a student or staff member that comes in contact, as CDC is recognizing it as an unrecognized COVID exposure. And if they are concerned about a situation, but it's not an identified case, it's not an infected person, but they're concerned, they should be practicing social distance and be very mindful of the symptoms for at least that 2-week period to make sure nothing does start to change. We will be designating a special room within the health room as a COVID-19 room. That way, if there would be a potential case in the school district during the school day, we can isolate that student and have a separate protocol and a safe place for that student and a safe place from the other students within the health office and school building. Likewise, the Department of Health has released guideline that if there ever is a case within the school, we're to contact the Department of Health immediately, and they will help us through that process in walking through the steps to handle the situation, contact the families, and then do the contact tracing. So we will be relying heavily on the Department of Health to guide us through that process. From a food service lens, as mentioned earlier, we will be asking all students to wash their hands prior to eating lunch. We think that is a critical piece, not just relying on hand sanitizer, but actually washing their hands. During the lunches, all lunches in the middle school, in the elementary, intermediate, and high school will be spaced 6 feet apart, and that is whether that's in green or the yellow phase. Elementary and high school lunches will have to use the cafeteria as well as some other areas like the gymnasium to maintain the 6 feet distance, but we will have accommodations for that 6 feet distancing during lunch periods. The breakfast and lunches, we're going to adjust our model a little bit. We won't have buffet lunches, but we'll have more grab and go lunches to be mindful of again, having food out in the open is something we want to try to avoid. So we want to have prepackaged meals so that, again, students can grab and go and take those back to their lunch area. We'll also be putting some low flow barriers in to control the separation between the food staff, and the students coming through. And then in the yellow phase, we would not be providing lunch for middle school. We wouldn't be serving lunch for middle school or high school students. We would be offering it to students. So if they would like to take a lunch home with them, we absolutely will make that available, and we'll have that available before they get on the bus to go home. But we would not be serving them lunch in the school day. From a transportation lens, We will be operating the normal in terms of what you think about the bus coming up to your house. We will be doing a normal transportation lens in terms of this bus is still operating. All students must be wearing a mask on the bus. Spare masks will be available. We've already coordinated to ensure that there is a supply of spare masks for each bus. So if a student would forget and they get on the bus, it's not a big deal. You see that often in stores now that there's some spare masks available. If you forget when you walk in, it's not a big deal. You know, our students forget stuff all the time when they come to school. So we want to make sure that our bus drivers have that availability and have masks so that they can give it to the student as they enter the bus. We also will be doing a strict cleaning process on the buses. After the morning run for our high school, middle school students, the buses will be disinfected. Then we'll go and do our morning elementary and intermediate school buses, and the buses will be disinfected. We come into the afternoon. Once we pick up the high school, middle school students, we'll be cleaning the buses again. And then finally, at the very end of the day, we'll take our elementary, middle school, intermediate school students home, and then we'll clean the buses again before we would end the day and then be ready for the morning run. The guidance from our that we've been receiving from as we develop this plan is that we would limit the students on the bus or vans to 2 to a seat. That is kind of the extreme limit. We're looking to have more 1 to a seat, but the extreme limit of the guidance we've been given is that it is still permissible for 2 to a seat as long as everyone is wearing masks. We also be doing things like having the windows down to allow some of that fresh air to flow through. Students, when they load the bus, will load from the back of the bus to the front of the bus as we pick up families. And we're going to try, in that process, we'll also have families that are siblings sitting together on the bus, again, to try to keep down the exposure as much as possible. And we will be having assigned seats on the buses. Parents' transportation is strongly encouraged. So again, going back to the survey results, we had 60+% of our families say that they would be willing to transport their child. If that is still the case and you can make that commitment, that will help us tremendously with the amount of students on the bus and be able to help manage that distancing concern. From an extracurriculars and athletics lens, we did approve a separate athletic health and safety plan. That happened at our June 15th board meeting. Originally, the state put out this health and safety plan, and it would be all encompassing of our athletics. And then PIAA came out and said, you can begin sports over the summer as long as you have a separate athletic health and safety plan approved. So that was the reason why this is pulled out of our normal regular back to school plan. And we have a separate athletic health and safety plan. That has now been changed to an athletics and extracurriculars health and safety plan, and will also be presented to the board this evening for consideration. There is a health screening process involved in that. We have been operating sports electively over the summer, and our coaches, our athletic trainers have done a very good job of doing the screening process before any practices to ensure that we have safety before any of those contact sports, any of the contact or practices begin. Participation numbers will be limited and curved based off of CDC and state guidelines. We have some set timelines and duration for activities. As you can see there, 1.5 hours for a yellow phase or 2 hours for a green phase. And then social distancing and masking as required by the Department of Education. We will be requiring masks to be included in all physical activities. When a student is not engaged in a physical activity on the sideline, coaches are on the sideline, they must put the mask on immediately. But when they're engaged in an activity, they are allowed to remove the mask at that point. Similarly, for our band and chorus and music program, those same protocols will be put in place. And we are also taking some additional steps to create small group environments for chorus and band, and also developing additional opportunities to spread those students out as much as possible, realizing that chorus and singing and band with the instrument playing is definitely a concern with the spread of diseases and molecules in the air. So this is definitely a concern for us. Our music teachers have all been involved in this process of developing our health and safety plan, and have been following all the guidelines at the national level to create their own local community plans. We will be limiting the activity schedule for the outdoor spaces. We're going to be, right now the PIAA has suggested that if we resume sports in the fall, that spectators are not permitted. So some of the things we're working through right now, particularly our indoor sports like our volleyball, that is limited to 25 students as well, or 25 individuals as well. So that presents its own challenge. But from the spectator standpoint, we're looking to purchase some technology to allow some live streaming of events that will allow the community and others to watch, families, grandparents to be able to watch their children. While it's not quite the same as sitting in the stands, we don't want to rob that experience from our community or from our parents and grandparents. So we are looking to install some live streaming apparatus as well to continue that process as long as we have sports in the fall. And again, that's going to be completely based off of the BCIA schedule and what their decision is. Some other considerations as we finalize some of these, the health and safety plan. We, as mentioned earlier, assigned seats are really important from the tracking perspective. So we'll be having assigned seats on transportation. We'll be having assigned seats in the classroom. If there ever would be a case, we can then monitor and say, okay, here's the student, here's the case, here's the individuals that were 6 feet around them for the 15 minutes. We can identify those, we can share that with the Department of Health, and we can appropriately quarantine those impacted individuals. So that is a critical part of this plan. Again, that will be implemented on transportation, that'll be implemented in our classrooms as well. We're also going to be implementing one-way hallways and stairwells, and we will be permitting students, particularly in high school, to be carrying their backpacks with them. The concept being there is that we want to limit the locker access. If you think back to your time in high school when you had locker access, everyone is crammed into a very tight area to get to a locker that's about 6 or 8 inches wide. So we want to limit that exposure and that close contact as much as possible. So that's why we want to allow the backpacks, allow children to carry stuff throughout the day, and limit that locker access. We'll be sending 2 surveys out. So after tonight's board meeting, depending on the outcome of the meeting, we'll be sending the communication out to our families. We also have developed, which we'll share with you in a second, a website to provide as much detail and explanation, deeper explanation into this process of our health and safety plan for the school district. 2 surveys will be included in those communications. The first one is a virtual learning option survey. And that survey is an opportunity for families that aren't comfortable with their child coming back. Again, whether that's a medical safety concern or that's just as a family you're not comfortable. And that's completely okay. We understand that this is a very unique circumstance. None of us have lived through a pandemic before, and each family is taking the proper protocols that they think are important. And so we want to make sure that we honor that. We want to make sure that we are giving our families as much opportunity as possible. So what this first survey will do is have families commit to having online learning for the first semester. And the reason why we're saying the first semester is it gives our families, the way the curriculum is set up is it's based off of a semester base. So it gives us the opportunity to set up the curriculum planning in a nice chunk. The semester ends mid-January, so that would be about kind of the break-in time period that you're making a commitment for. And then on the flip side of that, it also allows families to have that consistency for the timing period of that semester time period. The second survey would be the transportation survey. I mentioned this earlier, but this is the commitment from families if you're willing and able to transport your child to school. And again, that's broken up into 2 phases. Are you willing to transport your child to school for half the year, or are you willing to transport your child to school for the entire year? And what that will do is those 2 survey results will help us to do 2 things. The online numbers will help us to determine what our class lists are. We'll be able to gauge an interest in how many students are going virtual, how many students will be in person, and then we can develop our class list accordingly. And likewise, busing assignments will be based off of how many parents are willing to transport their child, and then we can adjust our bus schedules, the bus routes, all those decisions that we need to make in terms of buses based off of how many students will be riding the bus and how many parents will be taking their children to school. We're asking those surveys to be conducted by next Monday, August 10th, and then by mid-August, by the end of the next week, we would be going through all that data, creating the bus schedules, and creating the class list, and be able to get that information out to all our families by mid-August. Finally, we have developed a reopening website, which I mentioned. This website, which is here with my beautiful face, is going to be our point of contact, just like we created a website for how are we going to handle the COVID situation when that all happened back in March. We've developed a website of what is our reopening process. And so there's a homepage with a message from myself, and then you can see there's a video of myself under my picture there. On the left-hand side are all these areas that we just went through tonight in this presentation. The health and safety, the education plan, the transportation. All those are tabs on the left-hand side. And we'd ask families to click on those, to explore those, because each director has a video as well, just to share their insight from a personal perspective of the director talking about, here's what we're doing at the department level to ensure the safety of our students. And I just want to drive that issue home as much as possible. We all care about the safety of our students. We know that this is a conversation, a topic point that is heavy on everyone's mind, wanting to know what school is going to look like in the fall. I know from the 9 board members sitting here, administrative staff, and all those involved in the committee, it was constantly about what is the safest plan for our children. And that safety of our children in our community is paramount. And so that's why we've created this website. We want to make sure our families are well in tune to all the different considerations that go into all the different facets. And then there's points of contact. So if you have click on food service and you have a very specific question, there's a point of contact for someone to talk to that you can ask and get that information from. So finally, as we go into what the next steps are going to look like, we'll be opening up this meeting to some public comment after we convene with this presentation here. And then the board will have a chance to discuss this presentation and the plan that has been presented. Pending the outcome of the discussions this evening and what the board decides upon, we will be sharing information out with our parents and staff tomorrow. So that way everyone is aware of the decisions that have been made. We think it's really important to be transparent and open with the communication process as much as possible. From tomorrow, August 4th, until Monday, August 10th, again, we're asking families to strongly consider what the best option is for your child from the transportation side of it, as well as the virtual online learning side of it. And if you are interested in that virtual online learning, we're asking you to make that commitment by August 10th. And likewise, if you're able to do that transportation, we're asking you to make that decision by August 10th as well. And then that August 10th to the 15th, again, we'll be evaluating all those results and creating the final transportation plans and class lists. And we'll be communicating that out to the public. And then we have school beginning August 25th. So while that is a month away, it will come very quickly when you look at a timeline like this. So that is the timeline and next steps for the process. So finally, again, I mentioned earlier, but I appreciate everyone joining. I appreciate the sensitivity to knowing that people are kind of on all ends of the spectrum of this, and just want to reiterate the fact that we all are in this for the safety of our students, for the safe reopening of the school. This is a really important process as we go through. Again, I believe strongly that we need to make decisions based off of data, as well as what we think is the best opportunity for our students. So originally, we had talked about presenting a plan this evening, and what was communicated last Wednesday was presenting a plan for full in-person instruction, and that was to be operated because the county as a whole is operating under the green status by the governor. Likewise, all the other counties in Pennsylvania are in green right now. So I wanted to dig in and find some more data metrics that the board can more solidly rely on to make informed decisions of which phase we're going to be operating on. And as shown earlier, we're presenting that we would use the data metrics of over 50 cases per 100,000 would we be operating in the red phase. Cases between 25 and 50 would be operating in the yellow phase. And then less than 25 cases per 100,000 for the county, we would be operating in the green phase. And so our recommendation has slightly shifted based off of using data to make an informed decision. And knowing we are at that 40.7 mark right now for the county for this week, we are going to be shifting our recommendation and consideration to a hybrid approach for the start of the school year, knowing that a lot of things can change. We're going to continue monitoring this, but we think that it is important, again, to make these decisions based in data for the safety of our students and our community. So that is the conclusion of the presentation of the health and safety plan for our school district. Again, I'd like to thank the administrative staff for all their hard work this summer. I know pretty much every waking hour has been spent on working through this process for the safety and the consideration for our students, and then all those that have been involved in the committee, the 47 individuals involved in that process. have led us to this point. So board, I turn it over to you for now consideration and deliberation for what we have assembled this summer for a health and safety plan for the school district for the 2020-21 school year. Thank you, everybody. So at this point, we will transition back up to the stage. We will stop the presentation. We'll move the projector up, and what we will do is we will proceed with public comment, and then following public comment, we'll go into board discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pottinger, for your presentation of the new school plan. We're going to move on to Roman number 1, letter A, to approve the Brandywine Heights Area School District Health and Safety Plan for the safe reopening of school and the educational process for the 2020-2021 school year. This plan may be subject to change based on state or other applicable guidelines per board. Board A. B is motion for the board to find that the COVID-19 pandemic is an emergency under school code section 520.1, which may result in the school district providing the required 180 days and 990 hours of instruction to all students during the 2020-2021 school year by employing combinations of in-person, virtual, and distance learning appropriate to address the health and safety of students, faculty, and community, and the learning needs of students, and for the board to approve as temporary provisions the remote and hybrid schedules for instruction included in the district's health and safety plan being submitted to PDE per Board B. C, to approve the updated athletics and extracurricular activities health and safety plan. This plan may be subject to change based on state or other applicable guidelines per Board C. I'm going to move on to public comment now. I do just want to comment based on code 6.1 that all individuals wishing to participate in a public board meeting shall sign in prior to the start of the meeting and shall include the name and address of the participant, topic to be addressed, and affiliation if applicable. Myself may recognize participants who have not signed in after all signed in participants have spoken. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and must preface their comments by an announcement of their name, address, and group affiliation if applicable. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes per topic unless time is extended by the board president. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic unless approved by the board president. So I will turn it over to public comment. I think we have others in other rooms. So how do you want to do this, Mr. Potter? Do you want him to come down to a microphone, give a specific location you want them to be at?
So there is a microphone in the center of the stage here.
Okay.
So we would ask that anyone that is looking to make public comment, that when so called upon, that you will come to the front of the stage. There is a microphone at the center of the stage for public comment, and you would make your public comment to the board at that point for the public for their full consideration.
Anybody wishing to address, please come one at a time. Please give yourself space between commenters, just so we can abide by those 6-foot rules. So if anyone wants to lead it off. Looks like we have a willing participant here. Thank you.
You guys can't see you smiling.
Yeah, I can see your eyes. All right. Sir, do you want to identify yourself?
Sure, my name is Daniel Schlegel, I live at 37 East High in Topton, and I'm a parent of a student in the school district.
Welcome, Mr. Schlegel. I can a little bit, I don't know if you want to, if you feel comfortable taking your mask off, it might be difficult for us to hear through that. So,
So first of all, I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for the preparation the committee did over the summer, for the administration and the board. You guys have an incredibly difficult job to do. You were handed a few guidelines from the state, a few rules, but came up with a plan that I think is workable. I think a lot of my co-parents, neighbors, friends still have a concern about starting in-person instruction in September. Mr. Potter, during your presentation this evening, helped me understand that your red, yellow, and green phases are not the state's red, yellow, and green phases. So we will be starting in yellow, if I understand correctly.
That is correct, sir. Yes.
Thank you. So I would encourage the board to start in the red phase for this plan. I think it's a good plan, but I think there's so much uncertainty with case count and what's going on that our students should be in school at this point in time. Thank you.
thank you, sir, very much. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good, yourself, can you hear
Very
me?
good. Yes, I can hear you well. Just identify yourself and your address, please.
Sure, my name's Chris Rarick, 90.
A little bit louder, I get.
Can you hear now?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
better.
my name's
Yeah.
Chris Rarick, 908 Woodside Avenue, just up the hill, in Morristown, and I have a child who will be going to the elementary school and one to the intermediate school this particular year. So I would echo the previous comments, so thank you for the data, for the metrics, certainly versus the presentation that was sent out. I think the metrics were key to understanding. And so I had some prepared comments, which I want to make. I'll have to modify, based on the original information. But that said, just as a point of clarification, the rates that were listed are per 100,000. And if my research is correct, so there's about 400 to 425,000 residents in the county. So when you compare those rates to the published rates just on a per county basis, right, there's a multiplier of 4 to be applied in that instance. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So
Just to clarify that, what is on the website for the data metric website for the state, when you look at that, they break it down by county by the 100,000, but you're absolutely right, there's the 400,000 that are in Berks County, that's correct.
sure. Yeah. It depends on where you're pulling the data from, right? Whether it's the
Right,
dashboard or all over, right? They provide different things. So, so in terms of comments, if I can, just over the course of the last 5 months, so I have managed workplace efforts as part of my employment responsibilities to maintain production balance against the need for worker safety in these unprecedented times. And I can assure you that there are significant challenges, right, associated with this, right? And so relative to the protocols that my employer has put in place and what we are able to mandate is very different, right, relative to what that can be done in an educational institution. And we have done that, in a cohort that's probably about 30 times less than what you're attempting to do here. And I have a lot of concerns relative to the green phase, particularly if you look at the metrics and project that back historically over how many weeks that may have actually closed or not closed the schools over the period from March until the current timeframe. But it's not so much the protocols alone, but the manner in which they're implemented. Right, masks are ineffective without the appropriate donning and doffing procedures. Only N95 are equivalent, right? Provide filtration for airborne virus, and the encouraging of self-screening and related behaviors does not mandate compliance, right? And the harsh reality is that as an educational institution, the administration really has zero control over the actions of the populace on which your plan is predicated. So I urge you to take that into consideration in your determination of moving forward. Right, for confidentiality reasons, I cannot provide details, but I can say from bitter experience, again, that going everything back is going to have consequences. Even in a circumstance where compliance is mandated as a condition of employment, ongoing training is provided and a methodical, incremental approach is taken to reopen. COVID-19 strikes. I've seen it. I've had to pick up the phone. I've had to have uncomfortable discussions. So please be prepared for that unfortunate reality. Our young children cannot grasp the enormity of the circumstances, particularly the very young ones, or begin to comprehend what is required of them, right, to return to the classroom safely. And we have to think about what they can actually achieve by going back to school in order to keep themselves safe that they cannot understand. Right, and a plan which places a lot of the critical actions, right, on the actions of others, which we cannot control, is very difficult to implement. Reference cases for schools opening in Indiana, reference news stories about a summer camp in Georgia. So this is all possible. It's knocking on our doorstep. The decisions we make in life are easy. Living with the eternal consequences of those decisions, one cannot escape, particularly when the consequence of your decisions can be the tragic loss of a human life that in retrospect you had the ability to save. If everyone in this room came down with COVID, 2 of us would not leave. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Comment? Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm getting this on.
Could you please state your name?
Yes, Liz Taylor at 620 Kennedy Avenue, Morristown.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Go ahead.
First of all, coming in, I had significant concerns with the original proposal of starting in green, and I am very happy that you have come off of that. Hybrid is a very good start, but honestly, I also support some of the feedback for online. A couple questions I have though, just for my better understanding. If we were to come back 100% live, was that an all-day class session?
Yeah, so if we went 100% in the green phase, that is a full day session.
Where a hybrid and an online would be half day, correct?
That is correct.
So I guess my question really is aligned, and that's what I thought I understood. How are our children still getting the same level of education in hybrid and or online as we would have in the full day? And again, keep in mind, I'm not voting for the full day. I just also want to make sure that virtual, because I do believe we will get to 100% online, but whether it's hybrid or online, how are we making sure that our children are getting the full education to meet the requirements versus more of a watered down?
So what we're planning on doing in the educational phase in yellow in particular is that half the students will be coming in for that morning session. So our actual minutes that are lost are about 10 minutes per class period. So it's some, but it's not a significant, it's not like the class is cut in half. And then what we will be doing is we decided to do the AA model so that there's consistency. So that this kids come in 2 days in a row, can work with the teacher, and when it's only half the students, you can get a little bit more done because your class size is a little small. Likewise, for the students that are working online, so let me just continue the thought process. Sorry. So those students would then, on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, would be doing online work. And the idea here is we've been investing a lot in this hybrid model before this even COVID started. We actually started a cohort of teachers last year to start down this road of a rotational model of learning. So that the teacher would be teaching one massive lesson and then doing small group instruction with the students and projects to reinforce that learning and have application through a rotational model. That's something we've been investing in, again, before all this COVID happened, so here we are. So our idea is to apply that model, and then so when those kids are there for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday would be that application time. And so it's also when you kind of conversely look at it, then that Monday, Tuesday, the kids that are working online, that's why we're doing half day, because I think it's really important for our teachers to be connecting with those students. And so when you kind of extrapolate that, the kids that are coming Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when they're online, the teacher can reinforce that application, and they're working with them in the afternoon on those days when they're not, obviously teaching. So that's the concept behind the yellow, and why we can still ensure that we're going to try to push our. It's obviously not going to be the exact same as being in person all day. I mean, that's the reality.
Correct, but hopefully very close.
But we're trying to create those educational opportunities as much as possible. Why we create this hybrid half-day model. And then in red, unlike what it was like in the spring when it was all saying what we call asynchronous, which is here's the work and do the work, and then we'll check in with you. There's going to be more live sessions, so that way we can purposely do sessions with the students, get that purposeful learning occurring with our children, and then also have those opportunities in the afternoon for the children that are having difficulties, or you get into just like when you do homework at home, you have some questions. It gives the kids the opportunity to connect with the teacher in the afternoon to get that one-on-one support.
Okay.
So that's the plan we have laid out in order to try to make the best out of the situations that we're dealt with in the red and yellow phases.
And then the question around the virtual academy, I'm assuming that, I wasn't sure what you said earlier, is that the same curriculum as the school curriculum, even online, or is it a different curriculum for virtual academy?
So the virtual academy is a separate curriculum. It's a separate standalone third-party curriculum. Again, it's something we've been using since 2011, so we know it's invested. It's not just, we decided not to buy something over the summer. This is something we've been committed to. So we know the rigor there. That curriculum in the virtual academy will continue, kind of goes a long way, and what we're looking to do is either have a certified teacher partner in, or if we can, the best possible, have our grading one teacher oversee that, and then purposely connecting in. So if there's a student that's having trouble, they can do that, or if they're needing a little enrichment, that teacher can connect in with the students in live sessions, kind of one-on-one live sessions, but be able to help those students be successful in that learning environment.
Is that, do you know, is that equally as, has it proven to be equally as effective for the learning requirements needing to be met as our regular curriculum?
I would say yes, it has. So I'll point to our numbers of enrollment to kind of indicate that. So we started this in 2011 with just a few students. At that point, I think we had six students when we first started. We've now blossomed into 24 online students. And like I mentioned earlier, 250. I think the bigger data metric is there's 250 students that are electing to take at least one or multiple online courses as part of their normal day in high school. So there's 250 high school students that are doing that as part of their normal day class schedule. And so I would suggest that if that wasn't interest of students or that wasn't a successful learning environment, we wouldn't see that continue to grow and have the success that we do.
Okay, thank you. And again, just a final comment, thank you all. I know you put a lot of work and effort into the variety of plans, so again, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. Hello.
Hello, Chris McCarty, 819 State Street, Georgetown. I had one specific question with the yellow phase. You had Group A and Group B students. How did you plan to determine what group students were in? I know some Lehigh County school districts are doing that, and they've said like letters A through L are Group A and M through Z are Group B. Just a lot of other community members have multiple children possibly, and a lot of people are concerned with, well, does my fourth grader go this day and my sixth grader this day, and trying to find childcare for their kids.
That's a great point, and that's what we would not want to do. We understand that by doing a hybrid or going to a virtual red phase is going to be very challenging for families on the child care side. So we want to make sure there's as much consistency as possible, particularly in the yellow phase. So we would be doing it on an alphabet model. Gross alphabet, you'd say A to M, and then Z. But of course, we're gonna have to look at that a little bit closer, just to make sure that that doesn't skew things way far one way or another per grade level, and per building. But that's what we're thinking right now, is an alphabet split. The only difference I would say is that for our kindergarten students, we're looking at that more in a geographical area, and that's primarily because of transportation. Because we're gonna do AM and PM transportation. And so for some transportation efficiencies, we wanna make sure that we can have a bus go or multiple buses go this way in the morning and then this way in the afternoon. That's the only variance from the alphabet system.
Okay, and I did want to thank the board for all the effort they put into making this plan. I do feel like we should be starting in a red phase to the extent of, if we can't, I feel like if the governor's saying we can't have 25 people in our auditorium, without getting into the politics of it, I don't quite understand how we can put 400 kids in a school. How we can put 100 kids in a cafeteria, even with the gymnasium and having it spread out. It seems like that's a bit much for not being allowed 25 people to have a school board meeting. More than 25. So I think we should be starting in the red, and that's my opinion. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Going once. Going twice. All right, we're going to move on to then more discussion. I'll lead it off here. Yeah, sure. I would love to. I have some questions that were forwarded to me. So I'll start us out. Particularly looking at hybrid approach, I suppose now, versus the BVA, I guess it's BHVA approach. This person asked some very specific questions about that. Okay, so I think we kind of sort of answered this one. Will the students receive instructions from Brandywine teachers for BVA? I think we kind of said, based on the numbers, our goal is to try to match up based on that teacher's specifications that they would try to match up. The numbers have to be a certain amount to utilize our teachers. Is that?
Yep, exactly. That's not almost a policy. I think the only other caveat that is just how many students we actually have enrolled, and then match it with certification. So we can make sure we have enough enrollment to fill the teacher schedule. And if there is, then we can match up the teacher.
Okay. Specifically, I think we sort of mentioned this or answered this one as well. So how is the material taught? We kind of talked about ingenuity. We talked about what's the other K. There's another one we used to. It's okay. So are they recorded lessons? Zoom lessons at specific times? Self-paced lessons? A lot of questions here. So specifically, are they recorded lessons?
So they are what we call asynchronous. So the lessons are lessons that are designed to be self-driven lessons, but they're not live sessions. Okay. So there is live support, so we can stop. But the modeling for the online ingenuity curriculum is that it is progression based. So once you get past this one point, and if you ever take an online course, you have to get a certain past, and then you move to the next section. That's kind of what it's like. You get to this section, you've completed it, you show the taking the skill, it gets you to the next skill, and you move, progress through
So it's the self-paced kind of lesson.
It is the self-paced lesson. And again, there's life support there for the students.
Are there a certain benchmark they have to reach at certain levels in order to, to successfully proceed on to the next?
There is a schedule and a benchmark, and that benchmark is kind of twofold. It's the entire course, and then it tracks the progress of the entire course. If the student starts to fall behind or not keep up at pace, it will show that indicator of how far they are in the course completion,
as well as some online.
So
connect with them and support them.
So Mrs. Honich and her staff, they do a phenomenal job, even with the quick caseload that we have now, of monitoring all the students, monitoring that progression, and if students start to get behind, connecting with the student as well as connecting with the family, the parent, let them know that Johnny's slowed down a little bit. You might want to just check their progress and encourage them
Let's see here. Okay, here's a specific scenario question. If I keep my students home for the first semester and sign them up for BA, what will the transition look like when they go back into the classroom? Meaning, will they be using the same textbook and just pick up where the classmates are in that particular book? Will they be required to be at a specific point in the textbook in order to come back to the school? So no material is lost during the transition. Will there definitely be a spot for them in the classroom? So let's start with the training. Okay, so they're going to be using the same textbook. We said
There is a different curriculum.
curriculum there.
Yeah.
Okay, so how will that transition then look?
So kind of all that summation is if a student family decides to do online learning first semester, and then they transition in the second semester, that transition would, while it's not the exact same, the course content is similar. And when we look at the course content, again, while it's not the exact same, it at least gives a parallel of learning opportunities. And so when they come in and they transition back into grade learning classes in person with for the second semester part of the year, the teacher then would be working with them to ensure that they're up to par with the skills that they might need, but they should be able to pick up pretty seamlessly with that second part of the school year. Our courses are built on essentially a semester base as well. So we have 3 courses are divided into that two semester process.
So to kind of piggyback on that then, so what if we find if they're not, they're just a big disconnect, what would then the goal be on that?
So if there is a big disconnect between the learning that has occurred online and then in person, we want to make sure that's enforced. So our teachers will be absolutely engaging that. We do this all the time fairly seamlessly, and I know Cameron Shaker. I know Mrs. Lynch has spent a lot of time with the staff investing in that process to ensure that as students transition in and out and ebb and flow, that's not abnormal for us. That happens because sometimes our students in the regular basis have to go to an online environment for some reason. Schedule conflict, something happens. So they will do that, vice versa sometimes. A student will transition from online back into the regular classroom, whether that's a semester or that's mid-semester. And so we've done a really nice job of partnering with our teachers to provide that backup support.
Just to give a little feedback about what he's saying to support Mr. Potter's statements. So what we do in a transition, because we're really concerned about what that transition looks like for our students, I actually give the teachers the curriculum and the assignments and the grades of the students so they know what topics they covered and where they left off. If there is an issue, we always allow our students in certain circumstances to stay online if there is a huge disparity, which there isn't. But if there would be, they could stay in an online class, still come back to school, but maybe keep that one subject online, if that's easier. As far as the curriculum as well, Edgenuity requires students to earn a passing level to move on, or they have to remediate. So in the course, our passing threshold previous to this coming school year was 70%. If they didn't earn a 70%, they had to go back and remediate and retake that assessment in order to pass. That's how Edgenuity is set up. That's the framework. Trying to think what the other questions were.
Let's see.
But the transition's really
Will there be
important.
a spot for them in the classroom, I guess was the other question. So if they transition, are we going to guarantee them some sort of, whether we're in virtual at that time or whether we're in a yellow phase or green phase, will we be able to provide them a spot?
We definitely will. Okay. The family decides to do that, we absolutely will.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
We absolutely would transition them back and have a spot for them in a regular ed classroom if they move from an online environment back in.
Sorry about that. All right. This one was specifically about cyber school outside vendors versus BHVA. We talked about how the district certainly there's a cost differential between and what the taxpayers have to understand that there's a big differential there. she mentioned specifically, I know there's a district loss of money when students are enrolled in a outside vendor. Does the district get to keep their money per student if they are enrolled in BHVA?
Yes, the cost savings is significant. So for example, Mr. Cotter had in the presentation, so for example, a secondary education student, it costs $260 per semester course. So if you give them a full schedule, you're talking $1,300 for a full-time schedule for a secondary education student, while he placed the number on for $16,000 per pupil rate. So it's tremendously different. But what's most important, not just the cost savings, of course that's always a talking point, but what's most important in our district is keeping our kids. So we want to keep our kids, we know our children, and we want to make sure that whatever that plan looks like, it's personalized for them, their strengths, what their interests are, and we really gauge that when we develop a plan for them.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, I don't want to hog, but there's just some questions here. So infections. If a high school sibling is quarantined because they were sitting next to someone who tested positive for COVID-19, will that particular building school, will the elementary and or in this case middle school sibling also need to quarantine? So in other words, I guess what she's asking is if, for instance, they get they are sitting next to someone who was infected and yet they're in another building, but they happen to be the sibling of that individual, then would it be a household quarantine at that point?
So again, we're going to rely heavily on the Department of Health to help us through this decision-making process. But according to the CDC, the way that they have outlined it is that it's the person that is in close contact with the infected person. That is what is considered the close contact. And then the secondary person, like the brother or the sibling, we would have to then work with the Department on the side. That is something that we would transfer immediately, quarantine, or if that is something that we would closely monitor, keep the 6 feet apart, and then if symptoms would arise, then we would quarantine. But again, that's where we're going to rely heavily on our medical providers to help, medical experts to help us through the process.
Okay, then if a teacher tests positive, all that teacher's students have to quarantine. Same kind of scenario.
So yeah, same scenario.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Lunches. How are lunches being addressed at the high school and intermediate level? Will students be assigned seating? I think we said that's the case. Even at that level, we're going to ensure that assigned seating happens at elementary, intermediate, middle school, and high school level.
And we're going to keep people at lunches 6 feet apart. So the key thing is that they will be separated from each other.
I think that's important because cohorting, particular members, whether it's class or because then when you do the.
Guys, would you be willing to broadcast your conversation? I'm sitting right here and I'm having a lot of trouble here, and I don't know how other people are doing it.
I'm sorry.
Just like speak
Sure,
to the audience
sure,
rather
okay.
than to each other.
All right.
If you're willing to try
Okay,
that.
yeah, no problem. So it'd be more of a situation with contract tracing, I think, in that situation. That way you would have a cohort of people that you would be able to identify what you do.
Yep.
Talking about sports, are students expected to wear their sports attire to school every day, or may they change in the bathrooms since lockers are not available? They're available in locker rooms, so you're going to close those.
So for athletes to change into their attire,
Correct.
we'll permit that. That way they can change their attire for games or practice. But beyond that, that we're trying to limit the exposure, limit the number of people together in that facility, just like it would be required.
Okay, this is my last question. With some sports beginning at 3:30 at the high school, will students be able to attend the study hall in the library after school to work on their homework, or is that no longer an option? I think the concern is if they're going home, they want to ensure that they can get back. If sports are going to occur, they want to ensure that they're going to be able to get back, and be able to participate. Or if there's transportation that's to another school, then I think that was the concern of this particular individual.
So the answer to that is really dependent on the phase we're in. So if we're in yellow, we would not be having the after-school program, we wouldn't be having extracurriculars because we're in a half-day block. If we're in green, at least at this point, the thought was we're going to start the school year with athletics, and then some of the things with the after-school program, we wanted to wait until after Labor Day and see what the interest was of parents to attend that event. So it looks like we shifted our model a little bit from that green to more of like the recreation starting in yellow right now. So in the yellow phase, we still, assuming that athletics still occur, we will have athletics practices in the afternoon, but the extracurriculars are not happening because we would be in the half day block.
That's all the questions I have. Anyone else wants to ask questions or comments?
From us? You ready for questions from us?
All right. First question I have is, if we open in red, would there be any furloughs? Or don't we know the answer to that?
Staff furloughs?
Yes.
If we open in red, like I articulated earlier with the education plan, our plan is to maintain our staff members because we want to provide the same educational experience as we did if it would be in person. So while we can't duplicate that, while we can't completely replicate that, we can at least maintain our staff and maintain the same connections with students as much as possible. So the short answer to that is no.
Okay. Second question, using the metrics that we are going to be using to open up, going from, if we open in yellow to say red, let's just say week 1, for some reason we have 5 COVID cases, which according to our model will go by Berks County numbers. And providing that those Berks County numbers still stay in yellow, we will not go to red, even though we would have an influx in cases very quickly.
So I think one of the key points is that the data that we presented to the board this evening, to the community this evening, is guidelines. So here's our data numbers that we're using for each color phase. But if there's something that would happen at the local level that would cause us to be concerned, like you mentioned, 5 COVID cases that happened, we would need to make those plans based for the safety of our community. So if that would happen, we would definitely need to adjust the plan accordingly. But assuming that everything maintains itself as normal, we would be following the metrics devised for the county model.
Well, my point is this, if we're gonna use a metric to open, let's figure out a metric and if we have cases, what that metric is, so we, I guess, know when to go to red. You know what I mean? Should there be is it gonna be like 1 case we're going to red, or that? I guess that's the question I'm asking. Like, do we know that number? If we have numbers on everything else, what is the number for shifting gears?
We don't have that spelled out of what number would be the magic number to move the district from positive cases from a green to a red or yellow.
Okay.
Again, we're going to have to rely heavily on our medical experts to help us guide those decisions. And I think what's happening right now is that those medical experts are also working with schools as they go through the opening plan to help that guide those decisions. So you're starting to see that slightly happen with athletics as athletics begin. And if there's a case here or there that starts to pop up, the Department of Health has been stepping in and guiding school districts through that process. So likewise, if we have a resurgence of numerous cases in our student body or staff body within the school system, we would be relying on them to help us. So whether that's 5 cases or 3 cases or 7 cases, again, those are the metrics we would have to certainly rely on the state Department of Health medical experts to helped us through that process.
Okay, my next question, I had brought it up earlier, but I'm gonna answer to the public. Should we, based on the current plan, depending on the numbers versus the 7 days, 14 days, should we map out a plan as far as yellow to set date and then we'll check, like say yellow the first semester rather than, okay, we've been yellow for 14 days now, the numbers have dropped, we're gonna go to green, and then 14 days later they go up, we're going to red, and so we don't switch bang, 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 as the current model is shown and presented. So I don't know how everyone else feels, but as far as being the husband of a teacher, that drives teachers insane, not knowing. So we need to pretty much figure out how we're going to switch gears if need be. My next question is anybody going to be monitoring the bus drivers? Like, who's checking that as far as wellness, fever, whatever?
Yeah, so we have a partnership with Brandywine Transportation. Brandywine Transportation has also developed a safety plan for their drivers, for the transportation,
Okay.
for the monitoring of drivers, the health and safety monitoring, the wellness checks, as well as the cleanliness schedule. That has been communicated with the school district through our transportation coordinator, Brooke, as well as Mr. Nyman, our business manager who oversees Miss Ott, as well as the transportation department.
Okay.
So they have developed their own plan for that safety aspect of it.
Okay. Now, next question is staff, students, admin, teachers go on a vacation to a hotspot. Currently, I think the CDC is recommending a 14-day self-quarantine to certain states. Will that be administered or not?
So when that first came out from the governor's office, back early July, we decided not to proceed with the, it was a recommendation of the quarantine. We decided not to proceed with that.
Okay.
We asked staff to closely monitor health, maintain the 6 feet apart, to make sure that there's no concerns. But we did not mandate the quarantine for staff or for students.
Okay.
That's a question, but perhaps you can answer. Can we mandate that to our contract employees? I'm sorry, I wasn't speaking in the microphone. I asked if we can mandate that to our contracted employees.
If you're going to require them to quarantine, then certain rights kick in, such as they would be able to be paid additional 2 weeks above and beyond their accumulated leave if you're going to require them to quarantine. So they would still be paid, they would still get additional compensation for their quarantine if you're going to require them. But at this time, it's only recommended, so that is not something that's being looked at or decided at this time.
Thanks, sir. Sorry, Mr. Reaver. That's fine.
And final question is, are we doing any kind of temperature checks?
So at this point, we have not put temperature checks in the actual health and safety plan. It has been a consideration that's brought to the administration's attention. And we have been devising plans and looking at possibilities of ways to implement that. Part of the thought process was maybe we could do that as part of the transportation runs, do that with before the students get on the bus. It's going to be challenging for the bus drivers to do that because they obviously have to worry about driving and that aspect of it. But if there's a possibility to add some staff that would be able to travel on the bus and then eliminate their students even getting on the bus, transmitting any concern, we're investigating that. So that's not currently officially in the program, but we're absolutely looking at that. Again, that was a good suggestion that was brought up to us, and we're trying to look at the ways to develop that.
Okay.
It's one of those tricky things that when you look at some of the science behind it, that can be an indicator that sometimes it's not a great indicator. On the flip side, a lot of our medical providers, we go to the dentist or we go to the physician. That's their first line of defense as a way of monitoring weather concerns. So, from a practicality standpoint, Also, even if a student has an illness, a flu, whatever, and they're getting on the bus, it could be a good way to curb the normal sickness aside from the COVID-19 concern. So again, it's not officially written into the plan right now. We are looking at ways to try to implement that.
Yeah, because I mean, that would be something I would echo from Mr. Beaver, and it's the fact that like this is just an opportunity to be screening some of the students and staff that are coming into the building. You know, I'm sure we've all heard anecdotally, you know, other parents or, you know, perhaps we've done this ourselves, where you can't take a day off, you send your kid to school regardless. I think we can all agree though that if a child or an employee shows up with a temperature above 1.4, that's a person that probably is not really gaining anything from their day at school, whether they're providing the instruction or they're receiving the instruction. You know, with the feelings as kind of high as they are right now, especially with, you know, the community members, all the community members that came in to speak, all voicing kind of a similar thing, that they feel that, you know, we should wait a little bit longer before we go back. You know, we are kind of duty bound to provide every available way to ensure that, you know, the student safety is first and foremost. And I think that temperature checks are a necessity at this point, you know, in the way that life is now. It's no different than, you know, post 9/11, increasing security at airports and, you know, other options that they had to install. It's the same thing now.
So my comment would be, just, it's a point of entry, right? So you have a point of entry to the building, you have a point of entry once they get on transportation. If it's our transportation, those are 2 points of entry. So then would you require bus drivers to get the thermal scan out and scan that? It's just a philosophical question.
I think that the point of entry is our building. You know, the point of entry is the building. You know, there, again, anecdotally, I've heard of bus runs that take 20 minutes. CDC guideline is 15 minutes. You know, the vast majority of the bus rides, you're not going to be qualifying for an exposure. You know, however, once you get them to the school, you set up a point of entry. We have a point of entry. All the students come in for the intermediate school one spot, elementary, or the elementary school one spot, high school one spot. You know, they have to queue up and get their temperature taken when they come into the building. It's, you know, with the IR thermometers, although they're not, you know, foolproof or fantastic, they will give you a fairly good read. I mean, we utilize them on the ambulance now. Every patient gets their temperature taken when they get in the back of the bus. So I think that is an opportunity.
I have a question. Probably, isn't that part of what we talked about with the checklist for the parents? Wouldn't that be something more? Because once you get the kids to school, if they do happen to have gotten a fever in a certain amount of time, maybe the parents didn't check, or they did, or you know, whatever happened at home. But then their parents at work, I mean, that's a huge. Or if they just have a headache, I mean, I just feel like it's opening up a lot of.
I think if you utilize a criteria of 100.4 as a temperature, you know, at that point, like I said, if you've got your point of entry, like I'm going to use the middle school as an example. Your point of entry is the front entrance. The nurse's office is directly across from the front entrance. A child pops hot, they move into that. They're you know,
then are we diagnosing the child immediately with something? How do we know? My daughter just had a fever, and we went and got tested. She had nothing wrong. She had absolutely nothing wrong with her, but she just had a fever.
But she has a fever, which by definition, if she's got 100.4 fever or better, there actually is something that's going on, whether it's a viral infection, a bacterial infection, some sort of metabolic issue.
I just think like, and I don't want to sick in the school ever. I don't. I just want to preface that.
Nobody does.
If you're infection, anything, I don't want anything coming to my kids. It's just that happens all the time in school pre-COVID. A kid gets into school, and then it comes to the fact of what if some parent just gives a kid Tylenol to like be afraid of this fever check that's going to come. It's knowing they just have a fever one day, and it's, you know, I get it. I don't want to send my kid to school with anyone who has anything they're going to get.
Yeah.
But I think you're opening that up to the parents know they're going to get a fever. Sometimes this is their only option to send the kid to school if this is where we're going. they're gonna pop a Tylenol, they won't have anything crazy like COVID, and then we're masking situations because they know that what's gonna happen.
You know, if we can stop one case with a temperature check, that's more than enough to stop.
Yeah.
Yes, you're gonna have the people that are gonna give their kid Tylenol for all. It's the same people that send the kid with the flu to school every year. It happens every year.
Yeah.
You know, it's gonna happen, but temperature checks need to happen. And I disagree with you, Mr. Sheets, with the 20-minute bus run. There's only probably one or two of those. Most of them are close to an hour, if I'm not mistaken. I think it needs to be done at point of entry on the bus for the bus riders. The kids that are walking, getting dropped off, yeah, that point of entry is out here. But to have some of these kids on a bus, some of them are on for an hour. They will get exposed, especially the younger elementary kids who don't know how to social distance and will pull that mask off, and the bus driver is not going to be able to pay attention to all of them. It's going to happen. It will happen. I think we need to have it on the bus, whether that's our employee or radio and transportation employee. Someone needs to do that on the bus before they get on, in my opinion.
I'm okay with that. That's not disagree. So at this point, just to kind of pull this together, we don't have it written in the plan. We're investigating it. If the board wants us to incorporate that as part of the official plan, I need to know if there is support.
I'm 100% supportive of that.
Incorporate that into the.
One thing I think we need to think about, so you're saying doing it before they get on the bus?
Correct.
So that child tests with the temperature. Now, are we gonna hold up that entire bus? What if the parent's not standing there? What if, they go to the neighbor's house and that's how they get on the bus? Like, are you just gonna let that child there and not pick them up because they have a temperature? Like, what's gonna be that backup plan?
No. I mean,
What are we
no.
gonna do? Kind of send them back into the house?
Occasionally I might come across as a monster, I'm not. No, this is not, we're not going to shun anyone off the bus. However, I think that there does need to be something in place. I mean, with the CDC guidelines, Mr. Moss coming on this, is I believe that 6 foot under 15 minutes is not maxed. I believe that's not maxed with no PPE, right? If you're not wearing any PPE for 50, and you have that 15-minute exposure versus if you're actually wearing a mask. I think there needs to be something in place. They need to try and get in touch with the parent, on the transport. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're just going to have a 6 seat where that kid sits. You open a window or two on the bus. You create some sort of positive pressures or negative pressure, situation inside the bus. And we're duty bound to make sure that the child arrives to school safely. But again, that child would then go right into the nurse's office, and we would have a conversation with the parents of, why did you send this sick child to school? Is it because you don't have childcare? Is it because you had something better to do? The reality though is, like I said, that child's not gaining anything from a day in school. Oh, and by the way, they're placing all of their colleagues in danger by coming to school sick. So no, I don't think that we would just leave the child there. But again, I do think that we would need to, that needs to be something that the bigger brains that handle transportation and administration figure out.
Can I make a suggestion? Yes, sir. Because obviously there's some things that have to be thought through this. I'm not sure can we approve the plan this evening, and I'll continue looking into it, and I'll bring some recommendations back to the board at the August 17th meeting, specifically around temperature checks. Is that fair to everybody with that?
Yeah. I'm comfortable with that to maybe weigh in with support. I agree. One of my questions was, what was our thought process by not recommending temperature checks at this time? So I appreciate the question, I appreciate the discussion, and I appreciate your philosophy on that. My bias, for whatever it's worth, would be that temperature checks probably make sense, particularly where we're at now. If things improve, maybe we back off on that process or procedure, but currently, if we're seriously considering moving forward in yellow and or potentially green model, I think temperature checks at the point of entry is an important safety measure. We've talked about trying to do everything we possibly can. To me, that's a relatively easy procedure. And at the point of entry here in our buildings, we can address that issue of if someone does test high on a fever, then they can immediately be escorted to a nurse, and we have procedures recommended in place for them. I have concerns about the whole busing piece. Bus drivers have an incredible responsibility just driving that humongous vehicle. Then you load it with, 20 or 40 or 50 young people. That's an incredible responsibility. Then you overlay the enforcement of masks and the wearing of masks and this assigned seating while you're trying to drive a 72-foot vehicle. I'm concerned about what we're expecting of our bus drivers. And frankly, they're not our employees currently. They're out there, Brandywine Transportation employees. And while I respect the great relationship we have and the talents of our fantastic bus drivers, I think that's asking a tremendous amount to then be responsible for temperature checking and then engaging parents at the bus stop and all that kind of stuff. I'm wondering about the two children per seat. I think one child per seat is plenty. I think one child every other seat is plenty, even masked. And I'm wondering if we don't need to recommend having an aide on the bus who can supervise the children so that the bus driver can focus on managing the road and the vehicle safely.
So the 2 per seat came from St. Louis as our medical department. They're the ones that have guided that. That's more in line with if we go with the green case, because obviously we'll have more students. With the recommendation of yellow, it'll cut that bus load back. So we will be able to secure less students on the bus and concern. But to your point about we'll consider that as we go through the process of figuring out temperature checks and how do we go about that. So I think that's a valid comment, absolutely.
I guess I would just ask from another, so this is Brandywine Transportation that's providing these services. That's correct.
That's correct.
So if we, so it's going to be a situation where the bus runs, we're going to have X amount of bus drivers. We're not going to take away buses because now we're going from a green to a yellow phase, correct? We're going to be sticking with a lot of the same runs, just with less kids on them, most likely.
Yeah, the only way we would eliminate bus runs is if there's a large number of parents that opt to drive their parents to that. Then that allows us to have some bus efficiencies and limit that. But moving to a green program, this bus runs.
Well, I'm just saying from a safety standpoint, I would rather see more buses with less kids on them than cost savings. I'd rather see safety first here. You can say, we're only going to have X amount of kids on a bus. That's great. It's 10. If it's 5, fine. Then we can ensure that one per, as Liz was saying, one per seat or one per every other seat. I'm fully for that.
Just to echo in on that, Mr. Tomassi, we already have our budget, right? We've already budgeted for transportation. We've budgeted for those buses. If it's a situation where we can get 20% or 25% of the parents and say, hey, I'd rather drive my kid to school and maintain the same number of buses and maybe not take the efficiency this year and narrow down the bus runs, but just keep the same number of buses rolling with one kid per seat. I don't think anyone here would disagree with that. This is not a year to be trying to cut corners and save money. This is a year to just utilize the budget the way it's written and make sure the kids are safe.
Similarly, while we're talking about transportation, I have a note here questioning who is responsible for disinfecting the buses every day, 4 times a day or twice a day, as you outlined in your plan. Is that the bus drivers themselves?
It's Brandywine Transportation. Okay. So, in the regular, I'm assuming it'll be bus drivers. It's a transportation company. It's not just.
Okay, so yet another responsibility that's crucial that we don't have 100% control of, and the bus driver was hired to drive a big vehicle, not necessarily to be a cleaning lady or a kitty man. So just another piece that, let's think about what we're asking of people and how crucial their responsibilities are, and then let's clear away their challenges or that extraneous stuff and maybe just hire or assign responsibility that's more narrow so that we can have full faith that it's going to be done excellently as opposed to just done and it's checked off the list. Food for thought.
Do we know if there's going to be disinfecting muscles with in this procedure?
They are using the like disinfectant chemical. I don't know what that chemical is off the top.
Hand wiping?
What's that?
For hand wiping?
I'm sorry.
Hand wiping, fogging, spraying?
I believe they're spraying. They're doing this.
They'll get every single surface, floors, ceilings, windows.
Yeah, they'll be going through just like we do it in the classrooms. At the end of the day, as an air spray.
Fogging.
Yeah.
But then in between the runs?
In between the runs, yeah. I'll get clarification on that. That's what I understand.
Yeah, because that would be the only effective way to disinfect the buses.
Do we have to drive the buses back to a certain location or where?
My understanding is that we're doing it in between the buses. Once the students park, clean, and then go pick up the next round. And doing it. Yeah. That's what I understand. And because of the point because of less students on the bus, we'll have that ability to do that in the schedules.
So while we're talking cleaning, I have a whole list of questions that's like kind of all over the place, so I'm trying to fit them in where it might make sense.
Okay.
While we're talking cleaning, I appreciate you talking about the custodians and how you're gonna modify shifts and things to provide some overlap and great coverage. One of my questions was, has there been thought put into adding to custodial staff? It did not sound like we were gonna be adding any staff, just modifying procedures and coverage. What's the thinking in terms of not adding incremental cleaning support?
So we dealt by adjusting schedules and taking some of our part-time folks and moving them into a full-time capacity.
Okay, part-time to full-time. So that is like adding, it's not adding people, it's adding hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we thought we'd be in evaluation with Mr. Wetzel and his overall under the schedule, we felt that we were able to monitor it and take that work through that shift of staff.
And those folks, in theory, will have had incremental training about disease control and all this stuff above and beyond what they've already been taught and known in practice.
That's right, yeah, so in our self-safety plan, there's actually, we have to document where rationale is needed, and some of those, particularly with cleaning and sanitizing, are marked as items that we have to do. And so Mr. Wetzel, his staff are working on ensuring that those staff members are properly trained for those. And cleaning, whether that's a sanitizing or that's the regular cleaning process, is absolutely critical to your point earlier, that we have to maintain.
Some of the input that I had going to transportation and also to Mr. Bieber's point, as far as setting a timeline, do an analysis every 2 weeks to get your average cases. I would much rather see a set point of, say, first quarter, and then reevaluate the case numbers. So say we start school in yellow, and after the first marking period, or 2 weeks prior to the first marking period, we reevaluate where those case numbers are, and if that sends us back to red, or sends us to green, or we continue yellow. I think a set time frame is probably more beneficial to most parents in the district in setting up child care and setting up whatever that schedule may be moving forward. I think is more parent friendly and student friendly to lay out what the first marking period is going to look like, as opposed to saying, okay, 2 weeks we're going to be yellow, and then maybe you're going to go green, or maybe you're going to go red, and allow our families to have a little more planning associated And the other point that I would make is that it would be beneficial if we can to have aids on the bus, not for temperature. I do agree with temperature taking prior to entering the building. There's a million different options now as far as freestanding thermometer checks with iPads, the whole nine yards. There's the technology around here now to do so. But having an aid on a bus for when you're talking elementary students or intermediate students, just to manage having masks being worn at all time, bus drivers impossible. I mean, I know Hershey Park, for example, they increased their security staff just to reinforce mask wear. They have people walking throughout the park just saying, you need your mask over your nose. Those are adults, not unsupervised children. So I think if it's possible to have an aid on those buses to just enforce social distancing and masks if we're going the transportation route, I just don't see a way around not having that on the bus.
One thing about the aid, to your point about the set time of the quarter, that's why we spend so much time trying to figure out what great data metrics are, because I think it's really important for us to make those informed decisions with data. But likewise, if we're in a certain phase, I think it's really important for our families to know whatever gets us out of the phase color. What's that decision going to be? Are we just going to decide we're green one day, or are there some data metrics that say, here's the, for a family that wants that in-person, everyone come back, here's that light at the end of the tunnel that says we're going to go back at some point. So whether we use the 2 week that was proposed, or when we make this decision that we choose to go for a set time period, like a quarter, I think it's saying the same thing to our families. Here's how we will make a decision point, so that families know that there is a time frame that we can reevaluate at that point and make unless something major can happen in between there. But
sure, and I would echo that. I mean, if we're operating in yellow and there is a giant spike, we don't have a choice but to go to red. I guess my point is to say from go to yellow to green, to do that in a 1 week or 2 week time frame. I don't know what that means for parents and how they operate on making that swing if it's done in a 2 week time frame. If it's red, it's red. I mean, we don't have an option in that phase. But to go from yellow to green, I think that has to be a much longer time frame than 2 weeks.
I'm not really concerned about to go to the opposite of green to yellow, but to the green,
So to that point, I think that there's some far more urgency if we need to go to red. And that's Mr. Beaver's earlier point, like what are the metrics? What does it take? How scared do we need to be? How bad does the data need to be for us to shift urgently to red for the safety and health of our population? So that needs to be an urgent decision. Mr. Wagner, to your point, the movement towards more favorable, so movement from red to yellow or yellow to green, is likely not an urgent shift. It's more a shift driven by the trends and our feeling of comfort, or appetite, if you will, and feeling of comfort for taking that risk, if you will. So that's how I think about it. But I think Mr. Beaver's early point should not be overlooked, that we need to be very clear about if something goes south, what is it? Like, what does it look like for us to all agree that's bad enough, we need to act immediately, regardless of what the governor or any other politician tells us. We need to rely on you and the administration. One of my questions is, how will the board and the community be informed about how we're doing in terms of our student and our staff population and their ongoing health? So that if it is an outbreak, I don't know if that's the right word, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. If there's a pocket all of a sudden where we have 2 or 4 or 10 people, adults or students, who are identified as potentially really, sick, Is that enough to shut it down? Do we shut it down in that classroom? Do we shut it down in the building? Do we shut it down in the district? I'm not clear yet in my mind what those benchmarks might look like, what everybody around the table, what our appetite is. So for me, I still need to hear us talk more about that.
No, I mean, the one thing that I would just like, and I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the mics here. You know, a conversation that Mr. Tomasi and I had offline, you know, Mr. Tomasi and I both work in healthcare. You know, even though we've both been involved in healthcare for decades, and Dr. Carter, you've probably seen the same thing. This is not something like the stuff with COVID it's not like everything else on Google. You can't just get an answer right away. There's a lot of things about this disease process that people don't know, that they just haven't done enough research on it yet because it never really was an issue until this past winter. I think that what Mr. Potter has said is probably the best answer that we're going to get in regards to, we need to work with the public health department, we need to work with the Department of Health, and they're really going to be the ones that are going to give us the guideline or that metric on, okay, you've had this number of cases in this number of days, you need to shut your school down. And that's going to be how we're going to get that information. I honestly wish that there was a better way to, or a better thing or better information for the community. But honestly, from everything that I've seen in my profession, that's basically how we're doing things, is you are getting information, stuff changes, and nobody really has a definitive answer as to, what qualifies as this.
Totally understand the ambiguity and how new this is to all of us, but if in our sports teams, if the BCI has said if one football player on a practice field has COVID, the team is done for 14 days, then it seems reasonable to conclude that if one student in a classroom of 15 kids and a couple adults gets diagnosed with COVID, how do we then not, I mean, am I wrong to assume that we would then say, well, you better shut that down? But at least for some period of time, and have procedures in place to notify the board, to notify the families that are exposed, and to notify the community as needed. So again, I don't know what that number is, I don't profess to know, I'm just saying, at some point, it becomes crystal clear, as scary and new as this is, whatever your number is, it 50 people get diagnosed, should we shut the school down? Is it 150 kids? I don't know what the number is, but at some point, we should have a really clear answer.
So,
on the red, Mr. Beaver's.
Just to add to that point about the football team, we try to make it parallel. So,
yeah.
I've been in contact with the Department of Health. The Department of Health,
yeah.
Pennsylvania Department of Education, our medical provider is the same things. Looking through the CDC website, and there's nothing that I can concretely point to that says, here's the data metric, says this many people forces a shutdown. Now, I can make a parallel and say when that happened in the sports field, my understanding is the Department of Health was contacted, and then again, that case by case basis, they're the ones that guide that decision making process for the superintendent to decide here's what we're going to do.
Okay. So the key piece is flow of information swiftly from here in our buildings to the DOH and other bodies that you're relying on to guide you. So swift communication and then information back from them will drive your decision.
Make that local decision, yes. Yeah.
I have other questions, but I want to give everybody else a chance. I've spoken a lot already, so.
I have an answer. How many do you have?
Yeah, oh, just go.
We can just go back and forth. Like I can do one, you can do one. And I will just bang through them. All right, so, my question was regarding clubs. Like an extracurricular club, pardon me. Somehow I managed to tongue-tied arguments. Extracurricular activities, such as like the Key Club, National Honor Society, the more service-based clubs. Now, the thing is, there's no clubs. However, I mean, if we're doing virtual environment, can't the advisors still virtually meet with the clubs via Zoom? So that way the kids are still getting some sort of social component or at least being able to interact with each other virtually.
Yeah, so the reason we put that up on the slideshow this evening is that we want to make the point that if some club wants to meet after school, that in the yellow phase, we would not be permitting that. Because again, half the students are there, there's a lot of issues with it. So, but we wouldn't limit if a teacher wants to continue down the road in a online environment and presence to do the clubs, that's phenomenal.
Okay, would we be I think I'm drawing a line on the word, but would we be kind of not pushing, but encouraging the advisors to continue doing that? I mean, in some instances, these advisors are, given a fairly decent compensation for their co-curricular employment. I'd like to see, our children have lost out a lot, especially our seniors last year. They lost out on a lot of activities, a lot of different things that we can do. I think one of the main things or main ideas of this reopening is regaining a sense of normalcy. So how, not vehemently, but how much have we been encouraging our advisors during the summer? Like, hey, guess what? Even if we're in yellow or red, we're still going to be expecting you guys and gals to be, active with these students in these clubs.
So admittedly, education's been our priority, and figuring out the health and safety has been our priority. So as we transition, staff start coming in, then we can start having these conversations as we start the school year.
Can I interject something with that, just to piggyback? Regarding that, I mean, right now with all this going on in regards to student, staff, everybody's mental health at this point. Mental health's a big issue. And I know we have some challenges with social distancing. How will that look? What kind of ammunition will you provide our community when it comes to mental health services, especially most importantly right now in what's going on?
Yeah, so we're definitely absolutely want that. As you probably are aware, there's free counseling services for all grade point students right now through the PD task force, so that is available from the mental health side. Likewise, from the curriculum side, Mr. Volker and his staff and his principals are all involved in that professional development training for our staff so that we can work through that process and prepare our staff for that if they come back, as well as from the curriculum lens, making sure that even on, for instance, our first week of school, we want to make sure we're focusing in on that mental health. And let's take a break from just like inundating right away with here's your book, and then let's make sure we're focusing on the mental health and make sure kids are okay and check in on them, because it's been since March they were here. So that is a critical aspect of how we develop our education plan coming back into the school year, whether that's the curriculum side, whether that's the professional development side, or that's the actual way we start the school year, just to make sure they're okay. That is absolutely on our radar as we plan.
And any services for we have psychologists employed with them. Is there any mandate for them? How is that going to look in this environment?
So they're actually involved in that. We actually had school psychologists involved in the development of the health and safety plan as well. Yeah.
There was a whole subcommittee just on social and emotional learning as part of our plan with reopening. And it was all of our counselors, psychologists, some of the administrators, and they have a really great mindfulness curriculum already developed that they're planning on incorporating into the start of the school year.
Thank you.
Okay, so earlier I'll pick up on the mask enforcement thing, which, none of us want to be mask police. But the reality is, it is a crucial benchmark or pillar, if you will, in our ability to plow forward with our situation. So I was rather disturbed, frankly, the faculty survey or the staff survey. Unless I misread it, nearly 1 in 5 of our staff responded that they did not think masks were necessary. And if we are, as part of our go forward plan, requiring masks, and we acknowledge that 1 in 5 of the staff in our buildings doesn't support that, are we doing anything special to help get those folks on board? Because if it is not fully embraced, that this on our faces and covering our noses all of the time is crucial to our health, then it's not work. And again, nobody wants to be mass police, but somebody's got to be mass police, unfortunately. So I'm curious about how we're gonna address that, knowing that we're fighting a sort of a signal or a philosophy that says, okay, 5 don't want it, don't believe in it, don't want it.
So I think the key thing that's changed over the summer is that the government put out the order that masks are required. And
The
then
survey was done before that order.
it was, yeah. And so subsequent to that, also the Pennsylvania Department of Education, in conjunction with the Department of Health, put out essentially a Q&A clarifier for education. And that's where we pulled out some of the bullets of, here's what you can do for mask breaks. They need to be in a 504 plan or a IEP to not have them. But that's an order. We absolutely have to follow that. So whether it's a student or it's a mask or it's an enforcement issue, we don't have a choice. We're going to be following that. We have to abide by that. That's the rules of the state.
And you thought through how do you handle a staff member who is really not compliant, maybe sort of only half compliant, or really not compliant and maybe might not be requiring their students to comply. You've got stuff in place in terms of
Yes,
discipline and reminders and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly what you're saying.
Since we're on the topic of masks, can I ask about face shields? If students have them, are they allowed to wear just face shields, or is that something that we've looked into?
So they can't just wear a face shield. They have to wear a mask unless it's, again, documented is one of those ways that we're talking about. If it's documented and there is a medical exception for wearing a mask, then we will encourage the face shield for that child to be wearing a face shield.
I actually heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, but Lakewood School District purchased face shields for all their teachers, and that's all that they're requiring them to wear. I know you talked in the past, you understand the importance of being able to see facial expressions and, the faces and whatnot that the instructors are making. Is that something that you'd ever consider for our staff?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point. So we actually have purchased face shields for all our staff members as well. We also have purchased plexiglass dividers. So particularly our low incident students, our speech students, that we can create some opportunities to work on wear the face shields, have plexiglass off, remove the mask if they're comfortable, and then do that instruction with the student in that way. But
so the teachers won't have to wear a mask and a shield, they could just be wearing a shield during instruction?
In those unique speech
so not the general.
Just the unique speech circumstance. And that's why we bought that type. That's why we had the divider to be able to divide the student from that teacher as well. So it's also applicable like with our school psychologists when they're doing testing with the child, because those test results are predicated on the clarity, the understanding, because it's a very personal one-to-one process. It's in a very unique circumstances.
Are you willing to, because I know the research is showing that face shields are just as effective as wearing a mask. Are you willing, if research does come out, to allow the teachers to just wear face shields further down the line? Like, is that something we can look into, or?
I think it's very viable. Right now, we have to follow the order.
Okay, so the order is from the Department of Ed saying that they can't wear the face shields?
Right, but they have to wear the mask.
So just to be clear, face shields aren't as effective as masks. Being a healthcare provider, they've shown that if you have any sort of, in a healthcare world, it's, any patient facing forward scenario where you're within that 6-foot rule, you have to wear, I have to wear goggles and a mask. If there's any sort of aerosolized treatment, which is beyond what you're doing healthcare, I mean, we're putting on full N95s, but it has to be an aerosolized situation, the nebulizer, that kind of thing. If they're doing any sort of secretion, in our sicker patients, that's what we're doing.
But the teacher would be 6 feet, from the first row of her students in the class, could she technically just wear the shield then? No,
How do we order?
not according to the governor's order. Okay.
So if we wanted to invest it in masks for every teacher not realizing it?
No idea.
Well,
No, we invested in masks with the precautionary measures that if a teacher also wants to wear the mask, the shield, they can have that opportunity as well.
that was a double.
Yeah. We want to make sure that we afford as many safety protocols and processes to our staff as possible.
Mrs. Walter, did you want to add, because you had a comment at one point about some of our special ed population and utilization of masks. Did you get your questions answered regarding that, or?
I mean, I am concerned about our special ed population and, you know, how we're going to, I mean, I'm assuming that it's gonna have to be put into their IEP, that they aren't able to make a mask, or are we allowing them when they're in the learning support classrooms, like for pull-out, are they allowed to not wear a mask? Like how are we addressing our special ed population in terms of
So
that?
similar with the special ed as well as all our other students, we're going to encourage mask breaks per the department event that we ruled it out there. If they're 6 feet apart and we can maintain 6 foot distance, then they can remove their mask as well. That is spelled out in the guidance from the Department of Education. So in those circumstances, in a small group environment, in a full classroom, with whether special needs or not, we are able to relax some of those mask requirements. Under 6 feet, we absolutely have to wear a mask. But that's going to be really teacher directed, whether that's a mask break, we can take the kids out to the hallway because they're just you can tell they're getting itchy or whatever. Or it's that one-on-one case or small group instruction. It really has to be teacher directed at that point to make those decisions because there's so many unique circumstances that play with that.
Mr. Boswell. Just to make one comment, because this is the age of technology and we have access and people will blow up our phones until they get our attention. One of the things with the live stream was that the initial link that went out did not have comments available. There was no comments available on that initial link. However, when we were trying to pivot on the changes that we need to make because of the technical difficulties, comments were actually enabled on that new YouTube link. So there have been a bunch of comments that are being posted to the YouTube, to the live feed. I thought that we should let everybody know that we are not purposely ignoring anyone that's making comments to YouTube. However, one of the things about this meeting was that in order to make comments, you were supposed to be here personally at the meeting. But I do think that we just should let everybody know that's watching online that we're not ignoring them. We just didn't know that the comments were active. So, sorry.
Just going back, I mean, I'm on the Department of Health website right here, and it does say that can include plastic face shields that cover the mouth and nose for what type of mask applies with the order. It says a face covering, it says can be made of synthetic or natural materials, including cotton, silk, linen. And for the purposes of the order, can include a plastic face shield that covers the nose and mouth.
Okay, I'll look deeper into that.
I'm very concerned with emotional, like the emotional state of our children going back is one of my main concerns surrounding everything, you know, just everything that's going around in the environment. And then to send these kids back with this, when they can't see, I mean, I look around at everybody and all I see are just eyes and there's no emotion and it's hard. And you put a 7-year-old in that position, if they can't see their teacher smiling at them every day, they come from a home where there's no smiles, and that's the only time they get a smile. That is just such a huge concern for me. And if anything, if a teacher at least could just wear a mask or a face shield, a plastic shield, it would just be one small step that, you know, would help this situation. I don't love the emotional side of this at all. So anything we can do to make that easier for them.
I think,
would agree with that, particularly at the elementary levels. I'm thinking about a 5-year-old kindergartner, their first experience with their teacher at school, and they have no idea what that person really looks like behind the mask. To know that it's a friendly, smiling face. We can't touch, we can't hug, any appropriate touch, appropriate hugging, you know, a comforting hug. But those young ones, I mean, Andrew, you're an expert at this, right? Your background was little ones to begin with in kindergarten education. So you know how important that emotional connection is, and we can't give that. So I would agree, just particularly with the young ones. I think the high school folks are far less concerned. I do, please go.
No, go ahead.
No, really, go ahead.
So, I've been reading a lot about the immunity bill that, this is maybe more for Mr. Pratt, that's been going back and forth, in the state. And I'm just concerned what we're setting ourselves up for legally, if a child, comes to school with COVID, and then, what are the ramifications for our school? I mean, what are we having, just for example, like our bus driver signing off that they clean, can they come back and say, well, you let this child on the bus and now my kid got sick and I'm gonna sue you? What are our protections here?
That's a very good question, because I've received that from all of my districts. You have to understand the liability of the school district in this situation is very limited. You are protected by the Political Subdivision Towards Claim Act, which outlines certain reasons that you can be successfully sued. In this case, someone coming to school, they have COVID, they spread it around. That does not fall into any of the categories that you can be successfully sued, except for what would be called the state-created danger. So if you were not taking the steps, so if you were not putting the plan together, if you were not doing, making sure that you have masks, if you weren't clean, then you possibly have established a state-created danger by not doing all of those things. And then yes, someone would sue you. If I came here, you didn't do anything, you were supposed to do it, you're not following the state rules, you're not saying what the governor or the DOH is saying, then that can be successful. In the case of someone coming in and saying, oh, I had COVID at school, that's going to be very difficult to prove, number one. Unless you tell me that all you do is you just come to school and you don't go anywhere else, and only your family goes anywhere else. You don't go to the supermarket, you don't go to the bank, you don't go to a restaurant, you don't go take out, you don't touch anyone else. That might be an issue. But the fact of the matter is that they will not be able to successfully sue you. Your liability is very limited in those situations. And with employees, you have workers' comp to cover that, as long as they can. It's going to be very difficult for them to prove that they received, that they got COVID here as well. But there are some protections that are out there for them in those cases. But for liability, it's very limited in the school setting, especially since you're doing everything you're supposed to do as a school district.
Thank you.
Youth group and community sports. We're just gonna kind of outline this, a bunch of different topics on it. But youth group, community sports. So that's probably going to be a pain point, especially in the event that the county and the state are still in green and we are choosing to be more restrictive. Would there be a pathway, or would the school be able to maybe investigate a pathway where, the youth group purchases a farm, or they have some sort of cleaning protocol set up to make sure that, any of the surfaces that they touched, any of the stuff that they did, they take care of making sure it's disinfected and sanitized prior to leaving the building. And again, this is all predicated on if everything else is in green, however, we've decided to be more restrictive. Is there any appetite from the administration level to also look at something like that?
So at this point, have we outlined what we present tonight is that the outside organizations would not be able to come into the facility in the current environment.
I think we're gonna have to do a continual analysis on that and kind of that, for lack of a better word, cost benefit of, understanding that if we don't open it up to these youth organizations, whether that's volleyball or basketball or the inside sports, won't have anywhere to practice, and the kids won't have that opportunity. So we talk about mental health, we talk about outlets, and those other things, they won't have those outlets. On the flip side is you're obviously introducing new risks every time you do that, and then there's the whole additional cost aspect of having to go in and sanitize all those areas. So I would like to proceed with at least the start of the school year, saying let's hold off on that, let's get us into a normal. And then as we start to get through, September, and we can start thinking, because then, all those youth and sports that are connected to winter, fall sports, we start thinking coming in. I think we need to start evaluating that and we can start better understanding where we are as a county with some of these data.
And like I said, this is all predicated on every place else being green, right?
Yeah.
So if the whole state is in green, and the sports organization. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm mainly thinking about Bolton Athletic, right? Because I am involved with that. I am a youth coach there. I've got some wrestlers that realistically, like that is their outlet, right? They don't feel a connection at school. They might not come from the best families, but when they get to go to wrestling, they're with a group of peers or with a group of individuals that consider them an equal, and that might be the only opportunity for them to be, kind of viewed that way in their life. So it is one of those things, and that's why I said, it would definitely, I wouldn't want to see us incur any additional costs if we don't have to. So again, it would have to be, the burden would be on the group that's coming in. You want to invest in a fogger, you want to invest in cleaning supplies to make sure that you're wiping down everything that you're using in this room. Then we're willing to talk to you about something along those lines. But I think that there should be something, even when the school is in yellow, or like I said, the school has decided to go a more restrictive route. I think there should be a pathway for those outside organizations to still be able to utilize, a public structure.
Again, I think it's predicated on the color phase rating. I think if we go to yellow as a green, because that means the common data measures are, and that changes the philosophy. The more we open up facilities, the more risk we create. And if at this point we decide that we're going to yellow because there's too much risk and we can't bring our community, it's not safe for our kids, it's not safe for our staff, I have a problem saying it's okay for our youth to come in and use facilities after hours and not know what those protocols are. I have good control over the day when I have control of the building. As soon as I open that up at night, I have no idea what that control is going to look like. And, like you said, there's foggers and, so those things, if you're in charge, can control that door. There's also 100 other people that are coming in and cracks at the door to tear down and get in here as soon as possible. So I think it's a measured approach. I think we just need to continue monitoring. Unless we're directed, I prefer to just let's get school started. Let's see where we are in September, October. You're gonna have to start thinking down that road.
Yeah, to be honest, I bring it up because I can guarantee you that if it's not wrestling, it's going to be basketball. If it's not basketball, it's going to be volleyball. Yep. We're going to be having this conversation with youth organizations at some point. So it behooves us to have a plan.
Yeah.
Cool. It's you.
So just to follow up on the metrics that we talked about that are driving our kind of definition of red, yellow, and green, Mr. Conacher, I was curious to know, are you aware and are you able to share with us across Berks County what some other school districts are using for their metrics? I know there's been a coordinated effort across all Berks County school districts through the BCIU and a lot of sharing of information. Just can you help us? Are we the only one using the model that we proposed to use, or are there others that are using similar?
So we are all scrambling to try to find this. We are all scrambling to try to find this data. It's not available. So
The data point he created is unique to Brandywine. I know there's some others that have shared the concept of the 550 to 100,000 as a data point, and how they're applying that is similar. They're looking at, I think the gentleman's point that made earlier, the comment earlier, they're using the gross number of all first-time residents. The data that is shared every day by the BCIU is the data of how many COVID cases there are per the 400,000 residents. And so some districts are adopting that as the data metric. So that seems to be the only common thread of a metric to be able to use, which is that parts per 100,000. And that's usually what most people are relying on.
Thank you, that's reassuring at some level that we're not kind of grabbing something completely out there.
It's about the only thing we can grab that's out there.
Yeah, okay. Should I keep going here? Anybody else?
Go ahead. I have one more, but.
So I don't want to miss the opportunity to make the point, Mrs. Honich and the Brandywine Virtual Academy. Ms. Tucker, you said it's a fantastic offering, and it might be self-serving for you to say that, right, as the leader of the show here, but I want to make the public comment that it is a fantastic opportunity for any Brandywine family that has concerns about sending their kids back to school, regardless of what this board decides in support of the administration's recommendations or not. If you are worried about your kids and don't agree with us, please talk to Mrs. Honich and explore opportunities at Brandywine Virtual Academy. There were a number of inquiries that Mr. Tomasi read out to us. All of those detailed answers can be extremely well addressed by Mrs. Honich. And it's just, we're so fortunate at Brandywine compared to many of our peer school districts in this county and beyond, well beyond, that we have had 10 years experience in-house with a virtual offering that is just really top notch. And this notion that we're competing with cyber charter, that means they're not Brandywine programs, and that the kids don't get a Brandywine education, and that they don't get a Brandywine diploma, and that they don't get exposure to Brandywine staff. And it costs, 3 times or 4 times what we can do ourselves is just really, really powerful. So hopefully that makes it into the meeting minutes and out there on the video, because really, if you're worried at all about coming into our buildings, please explore the opportunity to have your kid educated through the Brandywine Heights Virtual Academy, BHVA, Mrs. Honich. And her team do a great job.
Yes, I'd like to echo that. As a former educator, I have done a lot of research on different cyber charter schools. And here at Brandywine Heights, we are incredibly lucky to have such an amazing virtual academy. And I can't say enough wonderful things about it. And to the point that other districts in our area are begging us for the information that we have on our virtual academies. So we are very lucky to be fast-tracked right here with pretty much the #1 virtual academy here in Berks County.
Thank you to both of you. On behalf of Mrs. Honich, we take extreme pride in our program. It is a top-notch. Other districts use and come to us to emulate their model based off of what we do. But most importantly, if you decide to go that route, I can guarantee that you're going to get a personal touch. That Mrs. Honich, her staff, are going to connect with you and support each child that walks through those virtual academy doors. And that is what makes it so unique. From the get-go, there's an interest to the time that they get through that course. There is personal connection. There's guidance all along the way. And I think that is critical to what makes our program so successful. So thank you for that positive plug.
Sure, absolutely. So as it relates to sort of this remote learning situation, Andrew, you use the term synchronous and asynchronous. And I think it's really important for our constituent audience and our community members and parents and families to understand there are fundamental differences between how that content is delivered. You know, from March to June, it was asynchronous. And maybe at the elementary or younger levels, there was more of a day-to-day, multiple times a day interactions. But I know, or at least I believe, I've been led to believe that at the older levels, at the secondary, high school levels, that it was more, here's the assignment, you've got a week to turn it in. Go have fun, I'm here if you need me. And that is not the model that you and your team are recommending for the fall semester or the fall quarters. Should we end up in a situation where we're doing some level of remote? I think it's really important for people to understand. And again, the faculty survey, I was really surprised, although perhaps I shouldn't have been if I had really thought about this model, this asynchronous model. The faculty survey said nearly 70%, again, if I interpreted it correctly, interacted with their students less than 2 or fewer times per week. And I just don't think that's nearly enough. So I was pleased to know that moving forward in the fall, that is not the model you are recommending. That you are recommending daily classes at designated times and a much more structured and disciplined approach. Do I understand that correctly?
So asynchronous means that they're not live sessions, that it is a follow the pathway of the learning curriculum that's online. Synchronous means that you are live and you're interacting with the teacher, and you might be doing some online work as well, but it's asynchronous is that live teaching approach. So in the fall, we spun up an asynchronous environment. Go through the curriculum, here's what we're going to do, and then we'll check this work. Sorry, in the spring, sorry, thank you. But we didn't have a lot of time to develop that. And we didn't have the technology, we had the technology tools, but there was a lot of challenges for families to swoop down on them in terms of internet accessibility. So we have a much more developed plan, and it relies more heavily on that synchronous live teaching approach. And to your point, I think it is critical that we have our teachers connect with their kids more frequently, because that is, we talked about that social emotional point, Mr. Thomas, you brought up earlier, or it's just the academic support aspect of it. I think it's really important to have those live teaching moments, as well as access to the teacher to answer the questions that they need to as they go through the online work.
And so the collaboration of their classmates.
Correct.
The discussion topics, the interaction with their classmates on the Zoom screen or Google Classroom, whatever it is.
And that's why we developed the yellow thing to have only half day live instruction, so that we still can connect with those online kids for that exact reason.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I keep going, guys? Anybody else want to jump in? All right, quick question about kindergarten. Again, I think special care needs to be given extra special care for those little ones that their first interaction with us is going to be in 3 weeks, and we're all going to be wearing masks and in this very strange environment. So could you just give us a real quick update? What is our current projected kindergarten enrollment? Are we still near 100?
We are near 100, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with that number and the change that you're proposing from full day kindergarten to a morning session, and then a different set of kids get an afternoon session. So away from a full day kindergarten model, how does that impact staffing?
So we will maintain staffing, because essentially what will happen is the class list developed for teacher A will just be split in half. So half the kids would come in the morning, and then they would teach the other half of the kids in the afternoon. So the concept behind doing AM and PM kindergarten, splitting kindergarten, is that we are taking the total number of students and splitting that total number of students in half, so we can better spread them out apart in that kindergarten classroom.
So our average class size in kindergarten is roughly 20, if I'm not mistaken. We have 100 kids. I think we have 5 kindergarten teachers budgeted and on board. So we're typically at 20. We're now saying our average class size in kindergarten will be 10 students.
10 morning, 10 in the afternoon, which is going to be phenomenal teaching for those kids.
Yeah.
it could be phenomenal.
And likewise, it's gonna be that way through the entire school system. Right, we're cutting the class sizes in half by doing the yellow phase. That's what we're doing.
Can you talk a little bit about what gym and recess look like? Gym maybe at the upper grades, like middle to upper grades, and then recess more at lower grades, where obviously physical activity and these mass breaks is gonna be paramount. We wanna get the kids outside as much as possible, but they can't touch anything. They can't share a ball, they can't play catch or kickball. What kinds of stuff are we recommending?
So that came out as part of the committee. I know it's been thought of by our building principals. So in terms of balls and supplies in particular, we're looking to have balls and supplies set up for the class. So cohort classes, let's just say one classroom for first grade and a second classroom for first grade would go out together. They would always go out together and they would share the same resources. And then the next class would go out and they would share the same resources. That way, we don't have all the balls being used by all 500 kids in the elementary school. We'll make sure that we're separating and creating resources for those students. We're also trying to limit the number of students that are out at recess, again, so that we can spread that out more, and then be able to have kids be able to take some breaks. Get out.
But if again, one person's piece of feedback, if you need to buy an extra set of sports equipment like that, balls, those kinds of things, one for each class as opposed to sharing among cohort groups. Again, I don't know what that investment would be, a couple $1,000, but Google me, who never likes spending taxpayer dollars, I'd be all for that.
Ms. Kelly has a phenomenal plan laid out for the recess, for developing that. And that's why I can speak to some of the specifics, because she went through all of that scheduling, making sure we're providing just a small group of kids to go out together, the supplies, keeping them more limited kids connected to that group. So she's been filled with a great plan with that.
Terrific, thank you. Nurses, so we talked about this whole notion of if somebody's identified and they go right to the nurse's office and there's a separate little cubby or cave in the nurse's office for COVID positive folks. Do we have special procedures in place to make sure that our nursing staff has what they need to keep themselves safe, because they're going to be exposed constantly more than probably others?
Yeah, so our nurses were part of the plan. I've been working directly with Dr. Reese, and we've been going through it for some additional more stringent PPE for them, such as masks, gowns, that sort of stuff.
Great. And again, any extra staffing there, or are we sticking to our model that we've historically been on?
Right now, the staffing model is we have a half-time nurse, LPN or RN that's shared between either the elementary or high school. We have a full-time LPN/RN. We also have a full-time certified nurse. That's what covers between high school or the elementary school. So basically 2.5 individuals that cover those two buildings. And then here in the intermediate middle school, we have a LPN/RN full-time as well as a certified school nurse full-time. So we have 2 people here as well to support that. So there's constantly almost basically double coverage if they're moving.
Okay, so that's the same staffing model as we've historically been. There's nothing incremental that we're recommending adding.
That's correct. We're maintaining the existing staffing.
Liz, can I get in for one quick question? Andrew, let's just say in the next coming weeks, we have Orange County spikes in a lot of cases, and due to the metric, we have to open it red. It could very well happen. Is there any thoughts of possibly, if it comes down to, let's just say it's that last week, are there any thoughts of possibly then pushing the start of the year back like a week, maybe for teachers, staff, everybody to re-gear to go to a complete online learning?
So
I know we have those extra couple days.
Yep.
I think switching from, the hybrid model to complete online learning is, well, it's a totally different model, and I think it's gonna take some preparation from what we went to last year, where it was just sort of do what you can, and now it's gonna be a set thing. Do you think we'll need extra time? If it comes down to that, last week and we switch from yellow to red, I mean, I wouldn't, you have my support if we push it back, put it that way.
I appreciate that. I think it's a very fluid situation. I appreciate that whole process. We do have the week before school starts. The dates are foggy right now.
Right.
But the week before school starts, we have 3 staff days built in, professional development of our staff, and then the day before students come back, also staff are in. So we have some time built in to help our staff accommodate to that, but of course that incorporates a lot of things. If you look at where we get in school last year from the curriculum aspect,
right?
How are we going to make that transition so that there's not gaps in learning? What are those new resources and tools that we have invested in since last spring to help better augment and support virtual learning? So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to support our staff on the professional development side to get us to that point. So it's definitely a consideration. At this point, we haven't formally said, let's definitely commit to moving. I think we need to just carefully take that one. Assuming everything is where it is, we start school in 25. I think when we get really close to the end of it, and something drastic will spike, I think everyone in the community and the county is going to be kind of reeling up pretty quick, because there's going to be more of a medical concern, and we have to make those decisions and adjustments. And also make sure our community is well prepared to be able to make those adjustments.
And can we make mention of what you and I have spoke about earlier in the week, as far as the subs, how you're going to add them? The building subs are going to be added into that professional development week, 3 days, 4 days. So they're better acclimated to the situation, providing we do have a teacher that has COVID. So they know what they're getting into as far as online learning or the hybrid thing.
So we have, in any other normal year, we have 1 building sub per building. And that person is there every single day, and then fills in as needed. This year, we've upped that to 2 per building to start the school year, just to help give us some additional support as we start the school year, whether that's illnesses or just to help with the daily processes. And then we're going to incorporate them into professional development training before we even start school, so that way all those daily subs that are with us every single day are trained with the same materials and resources as our regular classroom teacher. So whether a teacher's out for just 1 day, they can pretty seamlessly pick up, or if someone would be out with the unfortunate case of 14 days, they know the tools, they know the resources, and then it's more of a matter of just picking up the curriculum and moving forward. So,
I think that's a key piece. I don't know if that belongs in the plan necessarily, but that commitment to incremental substitute resources as a backup, I think is a really important update. I don't think we've been told that before, and that's great news. And I guess you assume support for that already. But to me, I think the community would be reassured to know that. I don't know the right form to share it, but I think the community would be reassured to know that.
Mrs. Walser, I just wanted to point out, when it comes to the face shield, and I think Ms. Eisenberg, what I think maybe Fleetwood could be doing is there are face shields that are designed to tightly cover the face and the eye area that are tight and that are plastic and clear. What I'm thinking of a face shield is one that just kind of goes over, it's loose, there's a gap there, things can certainly fly out. But I do think they may be procuring a type of face shield that is more of a tight, clear covering. I'm just projecting. I'm not 100%. I'd have to ask.
Yeah, I did just look up their plan, and it does say a face shield. It doesn't say specifically what kind.
They do now, at least now they do make masks that are
Tight and that are clear, yeah.
like a mask with the middle panel that are clear.
We have the option in the healthcare industry to wear a mask or a face shield that has like the gown or goggles. So they want eye covering and obviously a tight face covering. Is that what you do, Mr.
Yeah.
As well? Yeah.
That's the double mask. Face shield.
So maybe in the speech therapy areas, special ed areas, that would be something that we could consider an option.
To clarify, the shields that we got are a double barrier. They're not intended to be a single barrier kind of round and round.
Okay.
But for the speech in particular, that's why we also purchased the dividers, so that there's a double layer between the mask and the divider for speech and some of those low incidence cases for special ed. That sort of thing. Yeah.
Mrs. Yu, do you have more?
I think I'm good.
You good?
Not enough.
I'm giving you your opportunity. I just want to make sure. Now there was, I guess, one other community member that arrived late, and if there's, I just want to be fair and give you the opportunity if you would like to talk. If that community member is still here, I'd ask for you to present now and come down. May have left. Here comes somebody. Oh, there she is. Hello. It's okay. I just wanted to make sure you heard us from before. Just need to state your name and your address so we know.
My name is Sarah Busher. I'm at 22 Irvine Drive here in Taunton.
Okay. Can you go ahead and I don't know, can you take your mask off for a second, just and then speak directly into the microphone? It's been a problem for some of us here too. So
can you just repeat your name again? Sorry.
Seaward Busher.
Thank you.
Okay. Way to spell it. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time and really taking your children into consideration. One of my concerns is I do have two children here in the school district. One of them, my third one, graduated in 2020. One of them does have a health problem, and I do plan on keeping him home for virtual learning. Both of my children, actually. My biggest concern is the virtual learning and them having IEPs and that support that they do need in their learning. I'm iffy and worried that they're going to get that support, only because it's new to me, it's new to them, and I know at the end of spring, or at, fall or spring last year, it was a quick hurry up, we got to get this done, and they did fall a little bit behind last year at the end of the school year, and that's understandable. I'm extremely worried that they're not going to get that same support that they did when they were here in school. My other question or concern is if, let's say we do start in red, and we go to yellow, if I do decide to send my kids to school, I know you said you're taking it 2 weeks at a time in your decisions. If I don't feel comfortable when you do decide to go to yellow, am I able to keep my kids and do virtual then, if that will be the case? And if they do virtual, or not virtual, if they do come to school, how many kids are going to be in a classroom at a time? Those are just some of my concerns and questions that I think.
So let me make sure I get it. Hopefully I'll get it.
Excellent. First
one, in the virtual environment with the virtual academy, Mrs. Honich works with Dr. Reese and the special education teachers, and because they're still grading line students, again, I know you have experience from, and your mindset is the spring. Think more, okay, this is the normal operation. So Mrs. Honich Virtual Academy partner up with the student's IEP teacher, classroom teacher of record,
And then they help to develop that plan of what that's going to look like in an online environment. Often we'll work with the student, if it's the full inclusion, make sure there's steps are in place, make sure the student's comfortable as we go through that, make sure that the things are put in place, because they still will maintain a bring on teacher as the teacher of record for their IEP, to make sure that's being followed. So there are some safety protocols put in place for those students that go virtual online to make sure that there is that support back in the special ed staff. So that's the special ed lens of it. I think if you have a chance to talk to Mrs. Honich separately, and Dr. Reese, they can kind of better reassure you what that exactly looks like. But I would suggest that's probably your best point of contact, because there are safety measures put in place to ensure our students with IEPs are supported in that environment. The question about the class size in the virtual world certainly looks different.
I mean, like in person.
Oh, in person?
Face-to-face. Yeah, like, yeah. I'm saying like, I know there is a question, if we do start in red, which I honestly do think it's gonna happen, just with the way things are going. Like if I don't decide to send my kids to virtual, and I do decide to go the school route and doing face-to-face, if we were to start in red, okay, or happen to go to red, and you're making your decision on a 2-week basis, if at that 2 weeks you were deciding to go to yellow and that it's clear, but I don't feel safe sending my kids back at that time, how would that work? Do I have to send them, or can we switch to virtual?
So, a couple things. We're very blessed with our class size in the school district. We have fairly low class sizes comparatively. And so, if we go to a yellow, it's essentially half of the students that would be here that would be coming in. So, when you look at it from the physical class size, it would be essentially half of that. So, you have like 12 to 15, 15 would be the max, but 12-ish students that would be in that physical classroom at that point in the yellow phase, going to be half the students. If that point comes and you decide, I want to move into a virtual world, we are asking families to make that commitment now, so that way we can better understand class size and we can better make those online decisions. But it is a fluid decision. So in unique circumstances, like you pointed out, if a family decides, I want to go virtual at that point, it is fluid. We've been able to do that. What we do is we take the course, we look at what the student has learned thus far, and then in the online world, adjust that course accordingly so that they're not necessarily relearning what they've already relearned, but we adapt the rest of that course for that semester to meet the rest of the curriculum requirements and not have to repeat what they've already done. So that's what we do, kind of on those off schedule fluidity move into a online environment.
And it would kind of be essentially vice versa. If, let's say, we're on green, everything's good, we got a vaccination, it's cool, COVID's gone. We decide to come back to school, it'd just be the same process, just kind of comparing, what they've learned on virtual to what they're learning in school, and going from there.
Yeah, so and that's why we're kind of asking families to make that commitment for the semester, because of the curriculum standpoint, it's a clean break. And from the logistical, if we have a bunch of families, kids moving in and out constantly, it's going to be pretty challenging, quite honestly. So that's what we're asking to make that commitment. But likewise, if you decide to go virtual, and then things go green and we can do a little better, then we can have that transition happen. And I think that speaks to some of the questions earlier. How does that curriculum look, and what do we do to make sure that there is the supports for children to move back into that regular face-to-face classroom environment?
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. All right, we will move on to roll call, please.
Can you just reiterate, to be very clear, what exactly, in terms of the plan, are we voting for? We're voting to support the plan if we vote affirmative. And in terms of the phases, the phase that you will be recommending for school entry on August 25th, is that part of tonight's vote? Or is that just we're voting to support the model you will use to determine the phase?
You're voting on the model to use to determine the phase. The data point, there's data points included for the operation of school. The data points included for the operation of school that indicate right now you're in the yellow phase. So the communication out to families tomorrow is going to say the board has approved the health and safety plan. There's data points that have been included to determine the start of school. The data point used right now would be yellow for the operation of school. Okay?
And Andrew, like we discussed before, we're gonna approve the model, I understand, but I would also like to know, I don't know if we can change it, the wording, whatever, that we're gonna approve it for, and like a semester at a time versus the 2 weeks suggested.
What you're approving tonight is the 2 weeks.
Okay, so if I don't like the 2 weeks, I am gonna vote no.
Or we collectively make a decision to change that plan. Should not be a 2 week evaluation.
I'm asking about the 2 weeks. I don't like the 2 weeks. I would prefer, and this is just my opinion, that, like Mr. Wegman and I said, for childcare, for everyone involved, if we're opening in yellow, we can't just say we're gonna change this every 2 weeks. I can't say yes to that. I won't. I mean, we gotta make it longer than 2 weeks at a time so people know and prepare. We can't change our lives, our childcare and everything every 2 weeks. And I don't want to approve something for 2 weeks. So I don't know what needs to be done at this point, but 2 weeks is not an option for me.
David, do you have a recommendation?
Well,
Is a month better?
I think a semester is better. To start the year, we say, as of this point, right now, providing the numbers stay within reason, we're yellow for the first semester. Rather than, okay, whatever the numbers may be at the beginning of the school year is whatever color we're going to start, obviously. But that needs to be a certain set time rather than 2 weeks. I don't know that we can change it every 2 weeks. How are people going to get childcare, find out anything?
It's the same, I agree, it's the same even on the child aspect. How do you expect a child to spend 2 weeks in the classroom and then be gone and then wonder what's happening? I mean, my experience is always in the elementary and intermediate school, so that's what I have on. So the high school kids probably have the ability to adapt faster, but for my kids, I can't send them to school for 2 weeks and then tell, well, now you gotta stay home for 2 weeks, and then, no, now you're gonna learn virtually for 2 weeks, and that just,
yeah, there's gonna be
not
no
even
fluency.
I mean, the work aspect of families and the childcare and I can't keep, even when we're in normal sports schedules, on track, and when now we have to figure out school, which is supposed to be consistent. So
Yeah, and if it's let's just say, okay, we say a semester, and within the first week of school, we get an influx of cases. Obviously, we're gonna, at some point, need to make the decision to go red because it's an emergency to do that. But I don't think we can expect families in this district to, every 2 weeks, plan on possibly doing something differently with their kids as far as childcare and everything else. I just don't, for me, it's not an issue, but I know there's many people in the district that have two parents that work, and how are we expecting them to change their work schedule every 2 weeks?
So what's in the written plan right now, it says 2 weeks. If we have an understanding that we want to adjust the written plan to something else, I would strongly advise against a semester model. I think that's, waiting until January is way too long.
Is the marking period though, is that when?
I can live with a quarter, I think that.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, a quarter. I didn't mean a whole half of a year. Yeah, I apologize. I mean a quarter.
Mr. Bieber, can I interject something? Because you made an original motion, right? You made an original motion, so you would have to make a modification to that motion.
Okay.
Following Robert's rules, right? Yeah. That would have to be something.
Okay.
So
I'll make a motion to make a modification to my motion.
So before we do that, is there any other discussion or input on what folks believe is an appropriate timeframe? And my question, just to confirm again, so whatever we say yes to tonight, assuming there's 5 votes to approve it, it's not 100% set in stone, right? There is a caveat, the asterisk, that says at any moment in time, based on data, based on the situation in the environment, we will need to react. We may and we will react if it makes sense to do that. So is my understanding correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
There's wording in it that says that due to extenuating circumstances, adjustments can be made.
But in terms of trying to help people plan their lives and the whole notion of childcare and work-life balance and all that kind of stuff, your suggestion, and it sounds like there's support for that, is this notion of having to respond and react every 2 weeks as this decision's made by the district is a little herky-jerky.
Where is the IU in terms of like before and after school care, Andrew? Is that an option anymore? I know we used to have a pretty large group of kids for after school care. Is that still?
Currently, due to construction project, it is not. So we don't have the before and after school care housed in the elementary school.
But it's not, okay. But there is an option through the IU for our school, for our students that need before and after care.
So the providers that provide that before and after care, such as the German Christ Child Center, as well as the Long-Term Learning Center, are still operational. They're still having their students coming in. It's just as off campus. It's at that
I'm not opposed to reevaluating every month, just in 2 weeks.
I think it's important to still provide data to us for a 14-day.
Yeah, no.
increments. Absolutely, we want to have more data, correct?
Yes,
I mean,
I just think switching on a 2-week basis is, obviously, if it goes red, it goes red, but even if we were to start red and say in 2 weeks we get numbers to go green, I just think it's, for fluency purposes, I think a month, I could live with a month, 2 weeks, I don't know, a quarter would be
ideal.
ideal, but I understand too that can cause some issues.
we're giving him some great feedback, giving you great feedback here for directives on what that looks like, you know, what your concerns are. I mean, we have to trust Mr. Potter then to then say, okay, this is not a viable approach to just go from, you know, whatever. Every other week or every 2 weeks, we're going to be changing the plan. I think, you know, I think we have to trust that, you know, we've hired this man to make that decision that's right. You know?
I agree, but what we're being asked to vote on is written out in a 2-week increment. That's all my suggestion was, do we remove that 2 weeks and say based upon whatever, I don't write the language, but
David, are you comfortable with Mr. Wildman's suggestion of a month?
yes, I just uprooting kids, families on 2 weeks, the way this virus is going up and down. 1 week we could be in green, the next week in red. You know what I mean? You can't expect families to do that. It's virtually impossible. Like I said, for me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. Both of my kids are going to virtual academy. So I just don't, normal families who have 2 people who work, I don't see how they're gonna do it every 2 weeks. It just.
So
I'm feeling like I'm a low dissenting voice here because, you know, I fully trust in the fact that, you know, in this point, right, in the every 2 weeks, I feel that the more time our students spend away from school or in some sort of modified education plan, the less education they're getting. I think that we are not giving our students enough credit. I think that the children are able to acclimate to things that we personally are not able to, because they are more fluid, they are more malleable, and they're able to handle stress in different ways. As long as you're confident, they'll be confident. With that being said, you know, I've also been doing this job long enough that, you know, I know that that's not what everybody's saying. So I think what you need to do is you need to put a time frame out there. I'll second it, and then we'll see what everybody thinks.
Okay. Can I just provide a little bit of clarification? Mr. Pratt actually just provided this to me, so thank you, Mr. Pratt. So the wording says decisions will be made on at least 2 consecutive weeks of data. At least is key. So the direction from the board I'll take right now is through this plan, the wording's in place. It's at least the direction from the board that if you guys tell me a quarter a month,
okay,
we will make those
Agreed.
education decisions and have a commitment to, again, whatever direction you tell me, a month or a quarter for the first start of the school year, just to get things normalized. But it says it's at least, so we can extend that. That's
okay.
We made it vague enough in the language to give you that flexibility. And if this changes in any way, shape, or form, so let's just say after the fact that it changes, it'll come to you again as a board.
Okay.
So in 2 weeks, when you meet again, it may be different language that you're going to be saying.
Okay.
All right, because there's going to have to be a modification that's going to have to be made. So that, just to understand the way it's written, it gives the administration the flexibility, you're giving them the flexibility to make that decision, but ultimately, you're going to have the opportunity to say yes or no to certain aspects of it. So your thought, when you started talking about that, I didn't, that language was not evident to me when we put the plan together.
Okay.
It was vague enough to give some flexibility.
You could put 2 hours out.
Correct, Mr.
I'm not going to stop any board.
No, it says at least 2 weeks. Yes, we're good on the motion. Let's carry on. My apologies.
All right, are we good with roll call?
Here we go.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Weaver.
Yes.
Dr. Carter.
No.
Mrs. Eisenhardt. Yes. Mrs. Hume.
Yes.
Mr. Sheets.
Yes.
Mr. Riley.
Yes.
Mrs. Wills. Yes. Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
7 yeas, 1 nay, motion passes.
Okay, so moving on to adjournment, I have to announce that we did have an executive session regarding staffing and business district business.
I mean, they have their personal contract.
And personnel contract negotiations. Any public comments? This includes stuff, right? Any further board discussion? You?
Just like to thank everyone. I know this is a long meeting. I know you have a lot on your plate. I know it's a heavy decision. Thank you for bearing with the administration as we work through this process. And thank you for taking this huge responsibility on your shoulders to make this decision for our community. I know it falls directly on your shoulders, so thank you. And to the administrative staff that's sitting out there, they have tirelessly almost killed themselves going through this process. So thank you for
I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.